colleagues for waiting for me for a minute or two. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Camarillo Library Board to order, this special meeting. And would we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Kildee?
Here.
Trustee McDonald?
Here.
Trustee Morgan?
Here.
President Pro Tem Craven?
Here.
President Trembling?
Here. Mrs. Craven, could you lead us in the flag salute, please?
Certainly. Please rise, place your hand over your heart, and join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Let's see, do we have any amendments to the agenda this evening?
No amendments, Mr. President.
All right, hearing none, are there any public comments? Seeing none, we'll then move on to the consent calendar. We have two items on the consent calendar.
Move the approval of the consent calendar.
All right, we have a motion and a second for both the minutes and the library activity report. All those in favor? I almost said signify by saying aye. Excuse me. You can tell I just came in from the road. Please vote.
That passes unanimously.
I had to catch myself on that. Thank you for your patience, colleagues. Right. Let's see. Do we have any? There are no departmental items? No items from legal counsel? Comments from staff?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Rolfe is here to give us a couple of comments.
Ms. Rolfe, happy to have you aboard. Good evening.
And I'd like to find out how well our events are doing there. They sound really good. Things are going on.
Thank you very much. Yes, today my name is Jo Rolfe. I'm the Library Director at Camarillo Public Library. And Madam Mayor and members of City Council and City staff, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words about Mary Goldberg, our Youth Services Librarian, on the occasion of her retirement. Although she was unable to be here today, I do have her permission to briefly share her story. Mary grew up in the San Fernando Valley, relocating to Seattle to attend graduate school at the University of Washington, where she received her master's degree in librarianship. She transferred to the old Camarillo Library from Simi Valley Library in January 1985, and then left to become a full-time mum. After returning to work as the children's librarian at Moorpark City Library, she then returned to Camarillo in 2001. Mary says she feels very fortunate to have watched our library grow from a small building on Ponderosa to the impressive library building and special dedicated team of staff we have today. She appreciates the continued support of the city and the Friends of the Library, who raised funds for the building and who continue to co-sponsor programs for families, teens, and adults. We have strong collections because of the endless Friends volunteer hours that have benefited the library and the community. Mary Goldberg volunteered in libraries of her junior high school and high schools, and since then she has seen many hundreds of children and families learn to read and grow together by engaging with thousands of educational and fun stories and interactive programs throughout the years. Although Mary says she'll remain engaged with the community, we would like to invite everyone who has known and valued her contributions to stop by the Children's Discovery Room at the library between now and August 31st to sign a guest book thanking her for her service and to wish Mary happy travels on her well-deserved vacation and into retirement. The Library and Youth Services Department will continue to thrive with staff members Kelsey, Susan, Amy, and Donna, who will be sharing stories new and classical well into the future. Please visit us on Sunday for the trivia contest, and don't forget September is Library Card Sign-Up Month. So bring a friend, sign up for a free library card, and pick up a newsletter with our calendar events, and spread the joys of reading and connecting with your community. Thank you.
Question.
Madam Mayor.
Are you still having a little reception for Mary next week? Is that still
We
on the
certainly
calendar?
are.
Perfect. Okay, because we have something to give her.
Oh, thank you.
Don't tell her.
Okay.
Mr. Morgan.
At one time, you had a 3D printer. that was shown there by a group. Do you still have that 3D printer at the library?
Yes, indeed, we do.
Someone asked me that question. I said, I think so, but I'm not sure. And so you do. People can
Yes, we
use
do.
it.
We not only have a 3D printer that we can set up for use by appointment, but we also now have the virtual reality equipment that we just won through a state library
Oh, really?
grant.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Director Cody.
I'm just going to take just a couple of moments here to talk a little bit about Mary Goldberg. And my understanding about Mary, too, that she was a county employee. And when we decided to make the change, that she came over at that point with, our library. And it was a monumental situation there because for the children's library, extremely popular. And Mary was, as all of us know up here, was very popular. And I used to take my kids there before I opened up my shop. And I'll just tell you a real quick story about my daughter Madeline. We went to story time, and I read this story about a rabbit. And a lot of people in those days used to give kind of lightly and gently used stuffed animals to the library. And there was a little rabbit, and it was a form of a puppet that you actually put on your hand. And my daughter fell in love with that puppet, and she was not going to leave that library without her new friend, Rabby. And she caused it was a situation where she was not going to leave, and Mary came over there and saw it and said, well, why don't you just take Rabby home with you? And I think my daughter, probably shouldn't say this publicly, but she slept with Rabby for probably a decade. I mean, she wouldn't go anywhere without that Rabby. But that's the type of individual that we all up here know Mary to be, and a giving person, and loved the library, and is a real, main, huge reason why, it's successful as it is, especially obviously, in the children's part of it. But a wonderful person. She's going to be sorely missed, but I know she's left a really good legacy and a good bench strength. So I know that we're gonna be okay. But there was a real giver and a real doer, and somebody that just really loved her job, and I always admired her for that. So.
Director Craven, did you
Well,
have any comments?
No, I was going to, I've written a note to Mary, so I'll just let that stay at that. But I wanted to comment on the summer program. I think the summer programming this year was excellent, and moving to 2 programs, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, was really, really good, because then I don't know if there were any. I mean, obviously, we were only at 1 each Wednesday, but there didn't seem to be a time when it was overcrowded and there wasn't room for everybody. So that was very good to change to that.
Okay, I had 2 observations about Mary Goldberg that I wanted to share with you. One is, first of all, I don't have enough superlatives to describe Mary in her capacity as a librarian. And my wife, Kathy, who retired from Dos Caminos School in Pleasant Valley after 27 years last year, she and her partner teacher, Amy Stoll, would bring their kindergarten classes to the library to see Mary and to get to the library. And Mary has been just an absolute wonderful asset for our library, and we are going to miss her. The second observation I wanted to make is that several months ago, when Director Craven and I had to go read at Storytime, speaking of Storytime, Director Kildee, Mary and Director Craven put me at some ease because I had approached it with some trepidation. But as it turned out, Director Craven and I made the best pair of readers.
I think he's lobbying for next year.
We made the best, but Mary put me at ease together with Charlotte. And anyway, I really want to compliment her and commend her on her retirement. And so I just had those observations. Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there, and we wish Mary well, and we have the booklet to write in and wish her well as well. Any other comments from the trustees? I referred to you as directors, so it should be trustees. That's from coming in at the last minute. All right, with no further comments, we will go ahead and adjourn
Till
until September 6, 2017.
I'd like to call the regular Camarillo Sanitary District meeting for August 23rd to order, please. And let the record reflect that all the directors are present. Any amendments to this agenda at all?
amendments, Mr.
No
Chair.
amendments? Okay. Public comments for the CamSan District? Okay, we'll move down to item 3, which is a consent calendar with 2 items.
move the approval.
Second. Never mind.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. That passes unanimously. All right. Any comments from staff at this time? No comments, Dave? Okay.
Just one.
Any comments from the board members? Mr. Morgan?
Yes, just I want to see, how many staff, or is any staff members going to the CASA meeting?
Tomorrow's the last day at noon.
I know, I'm asking if you're going. I guess so, no one will be there representing Camarillo. Okay.
Any other comments from any? Okay, with that, we are going to recess from 6 to 7:30 for a study session, which will be a water and sewer rate study session. So with that, we are in recess.
I'd like to call the meeting of the Camarillo Successor Agency to order and let the record reflect that all council members are present. Any amendments to this agenda?
No amendments, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. This would be the time for public comments. I do not have any speakers, so I'm assuming there's no one in the audience that wants to address the Camarillo Successor Agency. Seeing no one come forward, we would move on to the consent calendar.
Move the approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and the consent calendar does consist of the minutes.
Oh, just the minutes? Are we doing?
We have resolution disbursement.
Yep.
That's
Madam Mayor,
under-
I do need to recuse myself on item B on the resolution on disbursements.
There's 2 elements, there's 2.
There's A is the minutes. What else is in the consent calendar?
B.
Right
It's a
here.
disbursement.
Am I on the?
You're in the
geez.
minutes.
I'm in the minutes. Just no wonder. Oh. Okay. Sorry about that.
No,
And I was
you'll guide
early.
me.
See what happens when you're early? You need to,
Madam Mayor, I
I
need to...
actually have a question on B. So let's do this. Let's pull B out of the consent calendar. How's that?
And
go back to what I said before, and that the minutes, and let's just do the minutes in the consent
So
calendar.
the maker of the motion has
Maker
to-
motion,
Okay, so who made the motion?
That was me. Yes, okay, we'll just do item A at this time then.
As a second, I
Okay.
agree.
you have someone that's going to abstain.
No,
Well,
not...
I actually have a question on B as well, so I'm so sorry.
I'm
That's
all-
why
I
in my
can-
mind, I was just going to do the minutes, sorry.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
That's
Ms. Morgan.
okay.
No, I can
We'll
vote
get
on
there.
item A. I just can't participate on item B.
Right. So this is the consent calendar, with the exception of B, voting only on the minutes. So please vote. And that does pass unanimously. Okay, to item B, you
And-
need to recuse yourself, and I have a question.
Yes, Madam Mayor, let me just state the grounds. I need to recuse myself because the warrant from Chase, Chase is a client of my existing law firm, so I will go ahead and recuse myself on item B. Mr. Pierrick, do I need to leave the dais, or can I sit here? Thank you.
Okay, my question on item B, and this is disbursements, and the description is January through June employee costs and a total amount. My question is, what employees? I am remembering that in the past, we had a list of who was included in those costs. Right now, there's no description other than employee costs, and it would be helpful to know who they are for. This is a successor agency.
Madam Mayor, we can get back to you with that information.
And tell me if I'm wrong, but shouldn't that be included in the agenda item in the future? Or maybe I'm asking for something you're not used to providing.
We can check our records and see if we provided it previously.
Let me ask the council, would you prefer that the list of who they are, the employees are, be included? And then we'll just set-
I don't have a preference.
That process is to reimburse the city's the city for administrative
Right.
costs. So it's when it says employee costs, it's really reimbursing the city for any costs incurred by various employees in various departments. This is the cost for.
Oh, I understand that.
So-
But from the successor agency standpoint, now from the city's standpoint, it seems to me our agenda item should tell us as members of the successor agency and the public exactly who is working for the successor agency is what my concern would be. So that is my question and suggestion.
Well,
I'll
wouldn't it
say for the
be-
future.
What, planning department, I would assume? Is there, what department?
Finance.
Finance, would be finance mostly?
And it's maybe what caught my attention that is a more sizable amount than sometimes. This is $48,000.
Budgeting?
And it,
It's within the budget, is it not? Yes.
I don't know, it doesn't give me a budget amount, it gives me a transfer amount. And it doesn't, I know it doesn't include the city attorney, because that would be shown separately. So seemed to be a lot to me for city staff, and that's what piqued my attention. So I'd appreciate it if I could have that in the future, and give me the balance of that, but I presume we need to finish this so that we can get it timely filed, correct?
I'll move the approval of item B.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that does pass. Oops. He's abstaining.
Not on B. I'm sorry, I hit the abstain button. There we go. I
Okay.
apologize.
I was assuming something there again. That does pass with 4 yes, with Mr. Tremblay abstaining for the
Someone tried to tell me.
reasons he presented.
Abstain.
And with that, that is the only item on the agenda, unless there are comments from board members or staff. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Okay, I will call the meeting of the Camarillo City Council to order and let the record reflect that all council members are present. Do we have any amendments to this agenda?
No amendments, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we next have the,
Your Honor?
Oops, sorry.
Excuse me. I believe that item E, purchase of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Storage Area Network equipment has been pulled.
So going back to amendments, and we're going to pull item E in the consent calendar. Is there anything else? Anything from council members?
So I'll move the consent calendar, less item E.
Second.
Not there yet.
Oh, sorry.
You don't have to.
Madam Mayor?
There yet?
Yes.
I do need to recuse myself on items B and O. B, because one or more payees are clients of my existing law firm. And on O, because one of the entities that would benefit from the chili cook-off would be Camarillo Hospice, which is a program of Livingston Memorial, which is a client of my firm. So I want to recuse myself on those two items. And I did have one question on G, on the capital asset policy.
So let me get back in order here. Did we have a second to Mr. Tremblay, or Mr. Kildee's motion?
No, I
I
don't
don't
think
think you
so,
have to
because
have a motion on that to,
What? On the consent calendar?
no, well, it was something to
he
do.
made a motion, but we weren't quite there
Right,
yet.
right there. Okay.
no.
So if you'll withdraw your motion, then we'll
I'll
get to
withdraw my
consent.
motion. Would you
How's
like me to
that?
make a new one?
Oh, wait a minute, we're not
Not
there
yet,
yet.
okay.
Finish all this first.
Yeah, we were on we thought we left amendments and then we had to go back. So, okay.
Sorry, Mr.
Now
Kildee.
we're at consent calendar and let's take questions. And you had a question on which item?
I did, Madam Mayor. I had a question on item G, which is the capital asset policy that I know our policy committee worked on and did a great job on. Two quick things. One is my understanding is that this policy really is consistent both in terms of the capitalization thresholds and the standards is consistent with GFOA best practices, and I just want to confirm that through through Ms. Roca, if you could confirm that for me, and then I have just a second thing I want to ask.
Yes, staff evaluated GFOA examples provided by the auditors and other agencies. So this is consistent with best practices.
Okay. The second is on 3G, Big 5, at the very end of the policy under F, control of capital assets. And it could be because I just wasn't reading it right or hadn't had enough coffee, but the very first sentence states, quote, a physical inventory of the city's capital assets will be conducted periodically as part of the fiscal year-end financial reporting process. I couldn't quite make up my mind whether that meant all of the capital assets would be physically inventoried each year, or only some of them would be inventoried each year as part of the annual process. And my understanding is that it's the latter, correct?
Yes.
And that's what the intent is?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what the committee agreed to.
Okay. I'm okay with the wording, but as long as we understand what the intent is, because trying to do a physical inventory of all the capital assets, all the physical assets each year.
Well, I think that it's explained as you go on in the rest of the paragraph. The Finance Department will provide each department a list of capital assets, and that's supposed to happen every year. And then it says the list should be reviewed, signed, and returned to the Finance Department, noting any discrepancies. So that's by the department.
So you have a physical inventory, but each department does their own physical inventory. They provide the fact and sign off that they did that. Then the last paragraph says that the Finance Department could ask that and randomly select assets to inventory. So that would be over and above the normal process of each department controlling their assets.
Okay. No, thank you. That's helpful in context because I stumbled over the word periodically juxtaposed against each year. So that's where I went. Okay. That's fine. Thank you for answering my question on that.
And I think there's a policy, there's got to be a policy procedure somewhere else within our system that talks about inventory of capital assets from the department standpoint, because this is only from the
I think it's a
Finance Center.
procedure.
Yeah, somewhere within.
Because these are this is the only policy.
Okay. That's helpful.
But this is the finance side, yeah. Okay, did that answer your questions on that one?
It did.
Okay. So, any other questions on the consent calendar? So let me make sure I've got the things right here. We pulled item E, and Mr. Tremblay is abstaining on item B and item O.
Yes.
Correct? Now we'll take a motion, Mr. Kildee.
I'll move the consent calendar, less item E.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that does pass unanimously. Thank you very much. We next move on to the city attorney. And that item is a resolution establishing prohibition on riding bicycles, inline skates, roller skates, and skateboards on certain city property.
Thank you. This item was before the council at your meeting on June 14th of this year with respect to what became ordinance number 1142 that amended Chapter 10.44 of the Camarillo Municipal Code, and a copy of that ordinance is included in your agenda packet, and that includes the various regulation amendments. There was also a discussion on June 14th about a resolution that is authorized by your code to designate the certain city property where there would not be permitted the use of bicycles, skateboards, roller skates, or inline skates. And during that meeting, it was decided that that resolution needed to have some further clarification, so it was referred to your policy committee. And the policy committee did review the resolution on July 20th of this year, and at that meeting, direction was given to staff with respect to modifications to the resolution. In your agenda packet, big page A3 is the proposed resolution. As you can see, it references the Municipal Code Section 11.76 that authorizes such a resolution. We note that in December of 2009, there was a resolution 2009-183 that was passed with respect to restriction of such items on Ventura Boulevard, and the decision was made to incorporate that restriction into the draft resolution that's in front of you. So for purposes of this resolution, if you look at Section D, city property is defined only to include Constitution Park, Dizdar Park, the Camarillo Library Courtyard, and the public sidewalk or right-of-way in the sidewalks on the south side of Ventura Boulevard from Colonia Place to Glendale Drive, and on the north side from Cedar Drive to Lewis Road. The restrictions on Ventura Boulevard are the same as the ones that were in the 2009 resolution. And then in light of the adoption of this resolution, assuming you adopt it, there would be no longer a need for Resolution 2009-183, so that would be rescinded, and you would just have this one resolution to refer to determine the limitations. So I know Councilmember Craven and Mayor McDonald were on the policy committee. I'm not sure if they have any comments. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. We have questions. Mr. Morgan.
Yes. When we do, now that we put this in order, which I'm glad we're doing this, do we have them appropriately marked? Are we going to appropriately mark those areas?
I know that the Constitution Park has signage on the stage area, and frankly, I don't remember whether or not there's been any postings on any of these other locations, but certainly signs could be posted, and the ordinance does specify what the type size of the font needs to be and such. So, yes, the posting would be necessary in order to put the public on notice of the restriction.
Because I think occasionally, if we look at the one here, Constitution Park, they need to be redone occasionally because they get kind of light. I've chased them off before and said, "Oh, we didn't see it." I said, "Come over here." Right there it is.
Yeah,
but it was kind of light. I think they need to be redone occasionally to make sure that people see it. Not to say I didn't see it.
There's signs, it's stamped on the concrete.
That's what I mean.
Anybody that doesn't see it out there doesn't want to see it.
It's just a little bit, it gets lighter as times go on. So.
You have a question, Mr. Tremblay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Perrick, I'm sorry I didn't check with you beforehand, but this action applies only to city property, correct? It does not apply to any of the Recreation and Park District property. I just want to know for my own purposes relative to any...
Yes, only to the property identified in Section D of the resolution, and it's city property.
It's only to city property.
Only the city property that's referenced in Section D, so it's not all city property, so it wouldn't be every sidewalk or street, and that's part of the reason we had this referred to.
You could ride your bike any place in the city.
Yeah.
I just want to know that it didn't pertain to Recreation and Park District
Understood,
property.
and the answer is it does not.
All right, thank you. That is my only question.
But the ordinance does. So the resolution is just city property, but the ordinance in here.
But the ordinance we adopted previously.
You can kind of compare that to what we did with people not being able to solicit inside shopping centers. If they've got that marked, their shopping centers marked, you can't go solicit. So it's their property.
Well, Mr. Perrick, do I have any issue with respect to voting on this particular item?
You have none. No issue.
Thank you.
I'm going to move the approval.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The effective date of this is?
Immediately.
Upon appropriate markings, because sometimes people don't hear this. If it's not marked, they're going to say, well, I didn't know it.
No, I should probably revise my response. Yes. The resolution becomes effective immediately. The enforcement of the resolution would require a posting of appropriate signage.
Thank you.
And is there a, for violation of this ordinance, where do we go to find out what the?
That is in chapter, I think, 1.12. I believe the first offense, if it's cited as an infraction, is $100. And then later in infractions, there's an escalation of the fine.
Okay.
Yes, well, I was right for once. It's section 1.12070. The first violation as an infraction is 100. The second violation is 200, and additional violations are 500.
Okay.
Another question.
I have a question, if you could.
But
Mr. Tremblay?
thank you, Madam Mayor. But you also ultimately, the penalty assessments would need to be added to those amounts, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Right. So they'll, in actuality, they will be higher than those base amounts. Those are just the baseline amounts of the citation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much the penalty assessment is. I think that's something that's imposed by the court.
It is. It's a material percentage of the baseline infraction level amount.
So this isn't just an administrative.
So this would be an infraction. Well, in theory, it could be a misdemeanor, but I think that would be a pretty outrageous type of activity. I mean, if someone is just constantly violating, and typically that's the situation. If it's a first-time offense, it would most likely be cited as an infraction. I think the police department's prior experience on this type of activity, as well as others, and they may even start with a warning, I don't know, but typically it would start with an infraction, and then when the offense is one that is repeated and more egregious, then it could be cited as a misdemeanor.
Question. For a young person that's got a skateboard, it's probably not worth $50 or $100. And the bicyclist that gets 100, and next time it's whatever it is, the bigger one. If you get a $50 fine, that's a lot for a young person to pay, and most parents are going to make them pay it.
And the parents better make sure they follow the law.
That's right.
I know, I understand. It just seems like that's a little heavy. I would have cut all those in half, because they will not want to spend $50, trust me.
That isn't just for this. That's an amount for other infractions.
That's correct.
I would assume,
Okay.
and I guess I could ask our police chief, but I would assume we'd go through a little bit of period of warning so that the first time would be a warning, and I don't know how you're going to keep track of who you warn on this, but I'm sure they'll come up with a system that.
I'm just thinking of Ventura Boulevard because I see so many, during different events and different things going on, riding their skateboards and not paying attention to you, period. I think those are the kind you better warn right away so they know that now.
Well, that's been the law for a long time. That's not new on Ventura Boulevard.
Okay. They haven't been enforcing it. There's no signs.
There were at one time. Yes, we had them put up.
Okay.
I don't know if they've been taken down, but they should still be there.
Well,
Anyway.
Bottom line, I'm assuming it's going to take us a few days to get everything posted and some warnings out there, but the repeat offenders, I'm assuming, will be find it gets to be expensive.
Move the approval.
Oh, I have one more.
Oh.
Sorry. You're in a hurry today, aren't you? I have a question on the ordinance, and the reason I'm asking is in a conversation we had regarding the resolution, we started talking about F Canyon and wanting to have the ability that people could ride bikes in F Canyon, therefore they weren't termed as city property. But if you go to big page 6, and it talks about prohibited acts city property, then read the first paragraph. I read that, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I read that F Canyon, in F Canyon, you couldn't do all of these things, which includes cycling. And tell me if I'm...
Yes, let me turn to it.
1044-02.
Under section
D.
1176.010, which is on big page A1, it specifies that the prohibition on riding bicycles or other vehicles applies where the city has prohibited it by resolution. So
That's a contradiction.
But then read that paragraph for me and tell me, am I reading that paragraph on big page 6 under 10.44.020?
And go to D.
And D is cycling, but read that first paragraph and tell me, does it exclude F Canyon?
Okay. Section 10.44.020 does include F Canyon. All these activities are restricted in F Canyon, except that if you want to apply that restriction, you need, under section 1176.010, to adopt a resolution, which is what we're doing tonight. Tonight we're adopting a resolution to designate that city property where they cannot operate skateboards and bicycles, etc. If it's not in your resolution, then they are not prohibited from operating on those properties. So that's the
So
whole
in
purpose.
The ordinance, if I didn't see the resolution and I picked up our ordinance and read it, would I know that by reading that paragraph in the ordinance?
If you just read section 10.44020, the answer is no. If you reviewed, I mean, we have a statutory scheme here, and there are other sections that apply. I suppose what we could do under section 10.44020D is add the words where it says cycling, scooters, skateboard, roller skating, subject to a city council resolution being adopted pursuant to section 11.76. We could add that, and in which case it would draw that link, and it would be more clear to the reader.
We can't add it tonight.
No, but we could bring that back to you at a future meeting, and we could put that qualifier in it. And that may be an idea the council would like to consider.
Because is it only item D, cycling, scooters, skateboards, roller skating, and inline skating that falls under what you're talking about needing a resolution? All of these other things do not require a resolution in order to designate what applies?
That's right.
What's bothering me is this paragraph, and let me read it out loud. No member of the public shall commit any of the following acts on city property, including but not limited to Constitution Park, Dizdar Park, library property exterior to library building, F Canyon, and all other property owned by the city, quote unquote, city property. So F Canyon is listed there. And before in the resolution, we defined city property as not including F Canyon. So that's why I'm having a problem.
Yeah, we defined it differently in the resolution because it's my understanding that on F Canyon, that there traditionally has been bicycle riding permitted. So that's why in the resolution that's before you tonight, we did not define F Canyon to be included in that city property. But as we're having this discussion, and I see where we are saying, in the language you just quoted, Mayor, it says F Canyon and all other property owned by the city, that all of these things are prohibited. Well, one of the things that's prohibited is, like Mary, is conduct any business. So I'm wondering whether or not we might want to possibly consider modifying that language. We do allow, for example, by a special event permit under section 1044-030, someone could obtain an exception to these others. Like, for example, alcohol is one example. If you have a special event permit, you are allowed to have alcohol. So the intent, I know, when this ordinance was being drafted was to be as inclusive as possible to prohibit activities which we thought would potentially create risks to the public or damage to property. And some of these limitations that you see here were kind of legacy language from prior ordinances.
Yeah, I can't tie up my horse at City Hall.
No, you'll need to find another place to do that.
Or raise
Well, let's get back to the resolution, which is really what we're...
No, but the resolution ties to the ordinance, and I'm just, so maybe you can look at that ordinance and see if it's clear.
Well,
Not bring it back.
I think based upon the discussion tonight, I would ask for direction from council. If you want, I can certainly come back to you at a future meeting. Would not take much effort to add language to section 1044-020D, which says essentially, and we'll come up with the words, but where it says cycling, scooters, skateboards, roller skating, inline skating, we could say as designated by the resolution of the City Council pursuant to section 11.76.
To me, it would make it cleaner, because right now I read these two and they don't quite...
That could be done without great effort.
All right, so the one before us tonight is indeed the resolution.
Kevin has a question.
Oh, Mr. Kildee.
Just kind of quickly.
Sorry, I can't see you back there.
I would think some students at Rancho Campana are riding their skateboard to school. I see that, to a certain extent. So I just want to make sure this would not preclude them from doing that. What it would preclude them from doing is if they do go to the library, they would have to pick up their skateboard, walk over to the library.
Only in the courtyard.
In the courtyard.
Yeah, only in the
So they
courtyard.
could ride it up
little
to
U.
the library, but once
Right.
they get in the courtyard, they will pick it up, put it in their backpack or whatever they do with it,
Carry it.
carry it, whatever they do.
It's not illegal to have it, it's just illegal to ride it.
And it's a good thing we described the sidewalks because, as you recall, Ponderosa at one time, we looked at that, widened that, and said they could do bikes and things on that sidewalk.
Right.
So that's not included in this thing. It's just mainly Ventura Boulevard.
Okay, I'm going to try again. Third time's the charm. I'll move the approval of the resolution.
And do we have a second?
Second.
We do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not, please vote. And that does pass unanimously. Next, we move on to an item under the City Manager's Department. This is the League of California Cities 2017 Annual Conference Resolutions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. During the annual business meeting of the League of California Cities, which will be on September 13th, 2 resolutions have been proposed for the delegates to the League to consider. And these 2 resolutions have been proposed by 2 cities who have an interest in bringing these resolutions forward. The first resolution is to implement strategies to reduce negative impacts of recent changes to criminal laws, and this is being proposed by the City of Whittier. This resolution seeks to commit the League of California Cities to address increasing crime in the wake of AB 109, which was adopted by the legislature in 2011, Proposition 47, approved by the voters in 2014, and Proposition 57, approved by the voters in 2016. In 2011, AB 109 began to shift nearly 45,000 felons from the state prison system to local county jails. Prior to AB 109, many of California's more heavily populated counties already had jail systems that were operating under court-ordered or self-imposed population caps. As a result of AB 109, the county jails experienced an influx of more violent offenders, while many petty criminals committing new offenses were simply booked and released serving no jail time. So people who would normally be held for more minor offenses and petty crimes are now out on the streets continuing to commit those crimes. Then in 2014, Proposition 447 was approved by the voters, which reclassified a host of felony offenses as misdemeanors, and it also increased the threshold amount for a felony charge of grand theft from $450 to $900. The effect of this change was to significantly stimulate the volume of petty theft, shoplifting, auto theft, and organized retail thefts, of which we've seen many in this city. And then in 2016, Proposition 57 was approved by the voters. And this act facilitates the potential early release of a large number of nonviolent offenders by providing that inmates are eligible for parole once they have served 100% of their base sentence without regard to any time served as a result of any sentence enhancements. And so the issue with Prop 57 is you may have a criminal who has a history of violent crime, and then his latest committed offense was a minor crime, which is may be considered to be a nonviolent crime under the statute. And so then the parole board they can't take into account the previous violent offenses. They can only take into account this minor offense. And so it puts a lot more people out on the street who are violent criminals. So the resolution that is being offered would direct the League staff to seek legislation expanding the term violent felon as defined in the California Penal Code Also, to tighten the criteria for the release of nonviolent, non-serious, non-sex offender inmates. To mandate consideration of an inmate's entire criminal history as part of the deliberations involving whether to grant an individual parole, and to consider creation of a task force that would be charged with issuing a report recommending further changes in law and supported by documentation collected by local agencies and other key stakeholders. If council will remember, it had appointed the mayor as the voting delegate, and if the mayor was unavailable, the vice mayor would be the voting delegate at this business meeting in which the resolutions would be considered. The council may give direction or give its opinion to the voting delegates as to how they would like the city to be represented during that resolution vote.
Your Honor, can we discuss these individually? I mean, I know he hasn't described the next one, but
I
I'd
would
like to
suggest that.
discuss this one before we get on to the next one.
So have you completed the first?
I've completed the first one. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Craven, you want to start?
I agree wholeheartedly. That's all I can say. I think we need to tighten these things up. We're just seeing way too much go on as a result of these things that have become laxer and laxer and laxer.
Any other comments? Mr. Morgan?
You know, having worked in this field, law enforcement field for 29 years, in the old days, they were able to consider all those. The parole board could consider complete prior record, but they changed it somewhere along the line. I think it needs to be brought back up again. I agree with Charlotte, and one of the things that we learned at the last conference for contract cities, when they had the law enforcement doing one of the sessions, they talked about one gentleman, and they know now, they pass it on to other criminals, that the limit for a felony is $900-something bucks, or $900. Don't go over $900. They had one guy that's been arrested 61 times because he kept them misdemeanors. 61. Now, I think something has to be changed. Make sure we bring it back into reality again. And so I agree with Charlotte. Let's move forward with that and make that kind of recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Tremblay?
I have a number of comments, Madam Mayor. I'm wholeheartedly in support of this resolution. Between AB 109, Prop 47, and Prop 57, as far as I'm concerned, they cumulatively represent a very serious threat to public safety, and I refer to them, frankly, as the kind of the triple witching effect in terms of public safety. And what really gets me is the latter two initiatives. The first one was sold in 2014 under the title of Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, when it's downgrading many offenses, including drug possession and some theft crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. And then to cap it all off, Prop 57 was sold last year to the voters under the title Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act. And it's even worse than Mr. Norman described, as far as I'm concerned, because that means potential early release of approximately 30,000 quote-unquote nonviolent offenders once they've served 100% of their base sentences. But what it does, among a number of other things, is to basically say sentencing enhancements are going out the window. And this 57 is going to start hitting the public later this year, and it's going to be serious. And ask yourself, in terms of the definition of violent offenders and nonviolent offenders, right now under 57, ask yourself, are these nonviolent offenders? These are just some examples. Rape by intoxication, human trafficking involving sex with a minor, assault with a deadly weapon, domestic violence involving trauma, attempted drive-by shooting, throwing acid with intent to disfigure, hate crime causing physical injury, and corporal injury to child. Those are just examples. Do those sound like violent offenses to you? And they do to me. And I'm sorry, I know I'm going on a little bit about this, but I feel very strongly. And what you ask yourself what the result is. The result is the Public Policy Institute of California, as noted in our materials, has noted a extremely high increase in crime in category since 2015. A high increase in property crime by 145%. And in violent crime by 54%. So how does that impact, if anybody's watching this, how does that impact the city of Camarillo and all the other municipalities across the state? Obviously, it impacts. It impacts in terms of the recidivism rate and the increased crime rate. So I am totally in support of this resolution. I think it's long overdue, and I just am astonished that we are at a point here where we have to go back and say, look, we need you to expand the term violent felony. We need you to tighten the criteria for early release. We need to mandate the consideration of an inmate's entire criminal history. This is just basic public safety 101, and the state is these triple witching provisions just fail that test. Thanks for letting me wax on. You can tell I feel strongly about this.
Can I say one more thing? Yes. Crime rates throughout California have risen. It's not one city. It's most cities. And it's because of this 31, at one time we were told 33% recidivism rate, but the newspaper had it the other day, whether they're correct or not, it said 31%. But that'll increase. That's the recidivism rate. These people getting released early and going back. But the crime rate itself, that's increased. And again, recidivism rate has increased, and I think that's going to go up over the years. So I'm all for going, for this one.
Thank you. Mr. Kildee, any comments?
I agree with what you've been said.
Okay. Let me ask a question, and I agree totally, and it's just what we need is some kind of truth in I sort of say
Naming
truth in lending, but in naming proposition, there's a whole nother one. It's just
54.
beyond me. How can that be Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act?
54.
Yeah, that in itself. But let me ask you the question. Obviously, I'm hearing that, and since I get the privilege of doing this year, there are times where we have debates and we add things. And is there anything that you feel would strengthen this resolution, or any changes you would suggest I propose?
Bring the felony limit back down a little bit. $900 is a lot to call a misdemeanor.
I agree with that.
So lowering it back to what it was prior to
Yes.
the passage of.
But I think that's part of what they want to do.
Let me get back to where it actually, because we talk so much, and then I know we get all worked up when we read this, and we get back to where the actual resolution is.
The criminals know that it has been increased.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at keeping it under that number. That's a lot to steal.
Yeah, I don't think we're arguing the fact that it's wrong. Let's see what the resolution that's going to pass and what the instruction's going to be to the League of California Cities to make sure it's included.
I'm not sure I see that
I don't
No,
either.
in the
No,
resolution.
it's not.
So I'm glad that you pointed it out, Madam Mayor.
It's not.
So we asked that that came out of
I mean, if you want to go with the the cost of living, maybe make it 500, but 900 is a lot of money.
So we
for
now
a
give
misdemeanor.
cost of living
Yeah.
to
No.
petty theft?
All right, and if I understand it, it's really the threshold amount for a grand theft charge, and bringing that back, dialing
Yes.
it back from $900 to $450,
Yes.
as I understand it.
Exactly. That's what I say.
Okay. I can certainly propose that. And I've seen times when they've proposes something and they add the change, so I can sure give it a shot.
A lot of people probably agree with you on that one.
Okay, anything else? Okay. Then let's move on to, unless we need to vote on that one separately, move on to resolution number 2.
Thank you. The next resolution proposed is for local control of emergency medical response. It's being sponsored by the city of Tracy. Back in the late 70s, as city fire departments were starting to implement paramedic and emergency medical response teams. In 1980, the state legislature enacted the Emergency Medical Services Act, EMS Act, in response to the development of paramedic services and a concern that there was a lack of medical oversight and coordination of emergency medical services. The act included language that established that the medical direction and management of an emergency medical services system would be under the medical control of the medical director of the local EMS agency. In each county, the local EMS agency sets local EMS policy, administers and provides medical oversight for cities and special fire districts to deliver EMS services within the county. In Ventura County, the EMS agency is a division of the Ventura County Health Care Agency. As we know, the city of Camarillo is served by the Ventura County Fire Protection District that is in charge of supplying our emergency medical services needs. This is a little bit, our situation here in Ventura County is different than what goes on in Tracy. So what happens on your typical medical call here in this county is that when a medical call comes in, the EMS agency, the dispatch rolls everything. They roll fire and they roll ambulance at the same time. So our citizens in Camarillo are getting full service emergency medical response. Now, the ambulance in our county will be waived off if the first responder requests. Otherwise, it rolls. And so, however, in Tracy, the way it works, the EMS director has decided to prioritize fire response and full emergency response. So when they roll on a medical call, they roll only with ambulance unless there's a need for fire apparatus. So the residents there are not getting the full response on each medical call. What's interesting also about this, and sometimes you really have to follow the money with these resolutions, is that Tracy also charges residents for emergency medical response and paramedic transport in order to financially support their fire department. So if they are precluded from immediately rolling and doing transport by county EMS, they're not getting the reimbursement for their paramedic units in order to support them. So the resolution, however, Tracy's resolution calls for the governor and the legislature to work with the league and other stakeholders to amend Government Code Section 38611, clarifying the definition of local control, providing broad statutory authority for local officials to determine emergency service levels and direct emergency medical response within their jurisdictions. That section of the Government Code is actually fairly broad, doesn't directly speak to emergency medical services. It's basically says that the legislative body of a city organized under general law shall establish a fire department for the city, and goes on to describe that they need a fire chief. And however, it says, notwithstanding the provisions of this section, no general law city shall be required to appoint or elect a fire chief or establish a fire department if such city is included within the boundaries of an established fire protection district, which we are. And that's the extent of the current code section that Tracy wants to amend. So they want to add a significant amount of language in here to protect their interest. They don't really have any suggestions in their resolution, but that's where they want to go. And that concludes my report.
Any questions on that one?
Yeah.
Mrs. Craven?
In reading this, it seemed to me that this is a problem that a city has with its county. Are there other cities that are having this same problem?
Well, they did have 5 other cities join in with them that are, I believe many of which are within their county. And that's the only information.
They don't really say they're having a big problem. They say they support, as I read.
Yes.
You can get a lot of support, but I didn't know if it was any other problems. That was my question.
More curiosity than anything else. So in Tracy, it's private ambulances. They don't run, the fire department doesn't run ambulances like they do in the city of Los Angeles.
I don't have that information, but I would assume that's the case. That's typically the case that you have.
In a small city like
Yeah.
that. Well, I would think that this is one of those cases where it doesn't affect us, but we support other cities who have issues and helping to solve issues. I don't think there's a downside to us, is there?
No, there's not.
No, it's a local control.
Yep.
I mean, fundamentally, it's a local control.
I think we should,
Well, more local than,
Well,
than the county's assuming. Because local government is really counties and cities, although the county's just an extension of the state.
there's our problem.
municipal, local control, yes. Counties have a different issues sometimes that aren't really in our bailiwick. Sometimes they're against us.
Well, it's because they are indeed an extension of
Exactly.
the state, so, yeah.
Well, I sure don't feel as passionate about this one as I did about the first one.
Neither.
I don't either.
I'd
I
support
don't-
it.
Yeah, I think we all do. But on the other, as I said, this is a case where we hope cities would support us if we had an issue that was more pointed to us than others. So as long as there's not a downside, I don't see any reason why we couldn't support it. Do you,
Yeah,
does
I wouldn't
anyone?
support it.
Would you support it, or you just remain neutral, or what would you
I would, yeah.
Support
support
it.
it?
You got
support
the
it.
votes.
I'm not going to get up and give a passionate speech or anything, but it would be a yes vote from the city of Camarillo. Is that what I'm hearing?
Madam Mayor? Oh, do you need a motion?
I think so.
I think so.
May I go ahead and make it?
Thank you.
Then I would move that we ask Madam Mayor to vote aye on both of these league resolutions when they come before the League of California Cities annual conference.
I should add here that the mayor, while this is this is an advisory vote, basically, because the mayor should have the discretion at the time of the meeting to listen to what others might be saying and could potentially decide to express her views differently than what the council is doing
An
now.
additional, they can change it there on the spot.
Yes. For example, there could be there could be an amendment to it, or someone presents evidence or whatever at the when the time is being considered. So the mayor would retain the flexibility to exercise her independent judgment at the time, and that this vote is basically expressing the preference of the council in an advisory capacity, understanding that the mayor will have the authority at the time of the meeting.
Then I would like to amend my motion to incorporate what Mr. Pierik has just said, to provide our mayor with that flexibility.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second, and I can tell you, I know the gist of all your feelings, so if they, unless they take out everything we like, and if they add more, that's not a problem, especially in number one and giving back the rights of so many people. Okay, with that, if there's no further discussion, please vote. And that does pass unanimously. All right. Moving on, I've been instructed that we need to get to a closed session and then to our study session. So I would ask that the city attorney announce our closed session item.
Yes, I can do that. We have two real property items. They're both under Government Code Section 54956.8. One of them, the property is at 2800 Berry Street. The city negotiators and the negotiating parties are indicated in the agenda for that property, and under negotiation are price and terms of payment. The other real property item, the property is located at 2521 Berry Street. Again, the negotiators and negotiating parties are in the agenda. Price and terms of payment are under discussion. And the final item is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9D2. The number of potential cases is 2.
Okay, great. So with that, we will recess to potentially some of those closed sessions and also our study session, water and sewer rate study, and the Camarillo Library Youth Adults Area Remodel Project update.
And I do need to add one other thing, is that if for some reason we're going to be getting to the agenda item on the real property at 2800 Berry Street, is that Councilmember Craven would not be participating in that. Did you want to make that comment now?
Yes, I'm not able to participate because of a financial conflict of interest, because my husband and I have rental units and receive compensation at this time from the Area Housing Authority for some of our tenants. And I do need to explain that a little more. Through the years, sometimes, even if you don't change tenants, people start earning enough money that they don't qualify for a subsidy. So sometimes I've been able to vote on things that involve the Area Housing Authority, but at this time I'm not.
So that will be noted, and with that, we are in recess.
These benefits of alkaline water.
The other option is
I'm looking for Dave.
I know what that says.
I'd like to call the meeting of the Camarillo City Council back to order and let the record reflect that all council members are present. Mr. Kildee, could you lead us in the flag salute this evening?
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. The first item we have on our evening agenda tonight is one of those proud times that we in the City of Camarillo family should be proud of, because we have two individuals from our community who, young members of our community, who have shown what it truly means to care and to rise above probably what they even thought they had in themselves and to do something really, really spectacular. So I would like to ask Natalie Smith and Sarah Hotchkiss to come up here at the top of the steps. And rather than me telling the story, I'm going to let you tell the story of what happened and what occurred when you two were on vacation in Catalina. One of you going to do it? Who's going to tell the story?
I'll start. You start. There you go. Hold it real close to your It was a late night around 1 in the morning, and I was half asleep, and I started hearing cries of help. So I woke up Sarah, and we woke up Sarah's father and grabbed a flashlight and jumped onto the dinghy. We were very confused because it sounded like it was a young woman or a young kid, and we didn't know if they were messing with us. So me and Sarah jumped onto the dinghy, started it as fast as we could, and drove over to where we heard it. We saw this man who had fallen out of his boat, and his foot was wrapped around the rope. Sarah jumped onto the boat and asked the woman some questions.
When I got on the boat, I asked her to let go of the dinghy so she could get his foot untangled, and she said no because their dinghies are expensive, and I was telling her that I could go get it after, but she didn't let me. So I asked the man if he could try and lift his leg, and I gave him some slack so he could get his leg out from under. And I asked him if he could feel me pulling the rope, and he said, yeah, he could still feel me pulling the rope. So I gave him more slack, and then he got his leg untangled and got back on the boat. And that's really it.
Well, my guess is, from hearing the story, is you probably just didn't even think about it. You knew somebody was in trouble and you were going to go help. And we really applaud you for that. And it also sounds like you did it in a very thoughtful way about it. You didn't put yourselves in danger, but you were there and you were going to take care of the situation. So we are very proud of you. We wanted to recognize you and take the opportunity for the community to see you are on TV. And really thank you for being rising above and really taking care of your fellow man. And it's really, really, really exciting to have gotten to meet you and to have you here tonight. And we congratulate the parents for raising such great daughters. It's
That's great.
You should be very proud as well.
Good for you.
And to the dad that didn't want to wake up, I don't know, we'll have to talk about that one. Oh, the mom that didn't want you want to hear? Oh, all right, we'll hear your story too. No. I know you were all there to help them as well, and we're proud of all of you. It sounds like you're a great family, and you've both of families have raised great daughters. We have a certificate of recognition, and this one is for Natalie, and this one is for Sarah. Again, congratulating you on behalf of my fellow council members, the City of Camarillo, for a job well done.
Congratulations.
Council members, anything you'd like to add? Is the water cold?
Actually didn't go in the water because we didn't need to, but if we needed to, we would have went in.
Yeah, we were very close to actually jumping in
Wow.
pajamas to help. And Dean, Sarah's father, actually, when we left, he screamed, "You need me to come," because he was about to swim in after himself. But we told him that we had it under control.
Even better. And he's obviously you've been trained on how to operate your own dinghy and take care of things, so you knew what to do. So congratulations on that. Anyone else? Mr. Kildee.
Just, I can't help, when I was reading the newspaper a month ago, there was an individual that actually drowned in a lake, and there were two people on the sideline that were actually watching him drown and did nothing. So for you to do that, you should be very proud of yourselves. Your parents and significant others, whoever your family members, should be very proud of these two girls, because they took it upon themselves to help somebody that was in peril. You don't teach that. That's just something that you have, and it's going to serve you very well in the rest of your life. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
I agree with what Mr. Kildee said, and I appreciate the fact that you were willing to take on something and tackle something, even though you didn't know what was out there. You thought you were going after a child. It turned out to be an older woman and a man, and you were still going to handle the situation, and it sounded like you did it calmly. So, good job.
And you didn't have any videos. You didn't have your camera with you to take videos, thank God.
Didn't have time for that.
I think Mr. Kildee said it all. Yeah, congratulations. I'm really proud of you.
Congratulations to both of you. School's about to start, and I understand you'll be freshmen at Camarillo High School. Very good. So you do indeed have a story to tell. What you did on your summer vacation. So congratulations. And before you go away, they do want to take a picture.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Congratulations to him. That's great.
So quick, I was clearing my eyes and they were on the game.
They were out of there. They took control. That's pretty cool. Oh my goodness. So they got, absolutely. Well, you've obviously taught them well because they knew what to do. So congratulations to all of you. And congratulations for you to saving 5 individuals. That's amazing. Yeah. Great, great. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Right. Yes. Before we move on to public comment, Mr. Kildee, you, I believe, need to close the Camarillo Sanitary District meeting?
Yes, due to the fact we had our water and wastewater study session and no business will become before us, I will adjourn to September 6th, 2017 at 5 p.m.
Great. Thank you very much. We move on now to public comment. I have two speaker sheets, and these are for items not on the agenda. And we allot 3 minutes per speaker. And if I think maybe one of you haven't been here before, I just don't recognize the name. But there's a clock, and it counts down when you start talking, and I'll let you know when you have about a minute left, just so you can wrap things up. And we'd appreciate it if you give your name for the record before you start to speak. Our first speaker is Furman Brown.
Good evening.
You got to pull that mic way up close to you. It moves. There you go.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Councilman Member Kildee, and Attorney Pierick. Yes, and the other council members. Aloha. Well, that's a habit. And happy we made it to Wednesday. So I'm actually Furman Brown, and I work with Vivint Solar. This is sort of what you will hear when I come to the door, because we go door to door. This is how we promote the awareness and the capacity for people to convert from non-renewable energy to renewable energy. Our program is no upfront cost, and it allows people to own the equipment and or pay less by simply allowing us to own it, and then they buy the power from the equipment that we install on the roof. So I would walk up to a door and I'd say, "Hi, I'm Furman Brown. I'm following up with the net metering program." What that is the net metering program where the electric meter was upgraded. And the short version is, in 2007, the Energy Independent Securities Act, it changed the way that power was being generated in America. It reversed it. So instead of homes receiving energy from the central power plant, non-renewable energy, it's now homes are the non-renewable energy source. This is a serious solution that has come about, and it's the Energy Independent Securities Act. That's good enough for now. In my other community work, I was a founding parent at the Ventura Charter School. We created that in 2003, I think it was. And I also created the Center for Art and Talk, which is a social art, music, culture center designed to develop social emotional intelligence and develop communities like Camarillo. And I've talked to from Santa Barbara to Oxnard and here also about that particular program. So now I actually work with Vivint Solar. That's good.
That's your warning.
Yes, now I work with Vivint Solar. We are surveying homes in the area to see which houses qualify to produce power on site on the rooftop. So you've noticed more people modernizing with solar. It's a new standard. They're being rewarded for solving the problem that most of our electricity is delivered from out of state. And you've also noticed the increasing cost of electricity. Edison has to have 33% renewable by 2020, or they'll be fined. So we help them by creating more local power. So we have two programs that are no upfront cost that simply convert homes to modern rooftop energy, and then you pay less than what you're paying now for your electricity. Does that make sense? Is a reasonable question. So the final decision is made by our site surveyors that come out in the trucks and the hats and the Vivint Solar essence. And my job is easy. I just get pictures of the electric bill, pictures of the electric meter, and voila, we have the capacity to convert someone to renewable energy and improve the planet. So there we go. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for reminding us how important that is to find sources of renewable energy. Our next speaker is Christopher Zeller.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. I come here tonight as a fairly new member of the community. I moved here back in April on the 29th. I come here today because I don't actually want to be here necessarily. I just see some concerns that are coming up in the community that I would like to see changed, to be perfectly honest. I come from a little community in the South Bay called Torrance. I grew up there for most of my life, went to college in the area. Then I moved to Lawndale, and then I moved to Harbor City for about 5 years before I moved here. And I have to say, a lot of the problems I saw with LA, which Harbor City is under, I'm seeing some of that here. I'm seeing some complacency in regards to projects and developments. I see the constant drive to develop for development's sake without securing the details and and securing the public's interest in before we move forward with these certain projects. For instance, I've been reading the Nuremberg newspapers quite extensively. Just recently, before the council came an approval for a zoning extension for the retail project for Springville. The man had 1 year, according to your deadline, to have something by September. They showed up empty-handed. You gave him 5 more years. I don't understand that. And also, I hate to say it, but the 1980s called that they want their economic plan back. Retail's being eaten alive by Amazon. Is it really even wise to consider overloading this city with even more commercial retail space? I mean, over half the town has commercial in one form or another, where it's the outlets or something else. It just doesn't seem like a wise course of action. And then we're spending money on a desalter project. Apparently, there's a $400,000 bill coming up, and we haven't even paid for the land yet. I just moved here, but I wouldn't buy the house and then go buy the land in Camarillo. I bought the land with the house. Doesn't seem very wise to me to go through all this process and end up being back where we started from with no site to build upon. See, the Oakmont project, I live over in Crestview, right next to a older community, a retirement community, as it were. And this council said in various comments that there's going to be no effect on traffic. I hear nothing, and that's great most of the time. But when I do hear something, it's sirens or it's some other emergency vehicle constantly going over there because someone has fallen ill health. So for you guys to say that there's no impact on the community, I think it's a little hasty. And the fact that this whole council chamber was packed with people and it still was railroaded through doesn't speak very highly of this council's willingness to listen to the people. And I looked at this council seal, the persons make the community. I think it's time, based on the SOAR results from voting and various other comments from the community, that you guys start to take that seriously.
Great. Thank you very much for coming, and stick around because we will be talking about that desalter. Those are the 2 speaker sheets I have. With that, we will move on to our departmental items. The first item on the agenda is a term sheet with Meyerstein Trust for potential purchase of real property interests, WT-110-01, North Pleasant Valley Desalter Project. Mr. Fox.
Yes, Your Honor. There are actually 5 items under Section 19, bottom page 4 of your agenda, that are all related to the desalter. And some of the information that relates to each of those items it would probably be best to have up front as we go through each of the items. So I've put together a presentation that will really occur in a couple steps. I'm going to provide an initial presentation that will create the foundation or the understanding of the project for all 5 items, and even touch probably on some of the elements of each of those 5 items that you have before you to consider taking action on. And then I will move to a one slide summary of each item, that at that point we can summarize and then consider taking action, and then go one by one through the action items at that point. So most of the presentation will be up front with the background, and then we'll go to each of the items after that.
It's like a plan.
On the slide, the header, I've provided also called it a progress update, because as we go through each of these 5 items, you'll start to realize the enormous amount of work that's occurred over the last year, and what's been accomplished to get us to this point, and prepare us to go to the next step, which is a major step to consider going to formal design. And so not only is this for you to take action, but I think it's just providing a good update on where we're at with the project. So with that in mind, as I mentioned, we've got the 5 items related under section 19. The first item will be considering a term sheet, and that is to basically lay out the deal points of a land purchase to identify that we have a deal that's pretty solid, to know that we now have a site identified, and there were other sites considered, and I'll cover why we're now considering this site and why we have a deal that looks pretty solid. The original environmental document identified a number of candidate sites. However, it then focused on one original preferred site that for reasons is no longer available, and so now looking at a new site, we do have some update to the environmental document, and I'll discuss that. We have a project manager that's been helping us through this process, and they were contracted to basically get us to this point, and then if we reach this point effectively ready to go to the next, we would consider continuing a contractual relationship with them, and that's an item for you to consider. We have been looking for grant opportunities. Have already received one essentially $5 million grant from the state. We're looking at federal, and we have another opportunity we want to present to you tonight. And then lastly, if everything looks in order, we will be considering a contract to move to formal design, which will take us into the next major phase of the project. So with that, some fairly brief background, and this is a topic that we've discussed quite a bit in the past months, and so I'm going to try and keep this brief, but also for anyone who may be fairly new to the project, unfortunately there is quite a bit of ground to cover, so I'll try and do that quickly but still make it an effective presentation. The area that's highlighted in brown represents the Pleasant Valley Groundwater Basin, which is under Camarillo, and this aerial photo shows the center of the city, which is really going to be the subject going forward of why this area is pertinent to the desalter and the location. The area that I show in red is a brackish water a salty plume that is now migrated. Brackish water flows down Cayugas Creek, but when it gets to the city, the north end of the city, instead of continuing to flow, it percolates into the ground and has actually contaminated the Pleasant Valley Groundwater Basin. Again, the Pleasant Valley Basin has historically had very good quality water. We have wells both at the north end of the city and the west end of the city that in the past we enjoyed being able to pump and deliver quality water. Now that this brackish water has migrated into the basin, it's creating an impact to the water quality, and there needs to be a project to both intercept any future flows of brackish water so that the water quality doesn't diminish even more in the basin, as well as extract the brackish water. It's been referred to as a mound. It's a very localized area that at least at this point, that the brackish water is contained. Left unattended, it will eventually migrate further into the basin and contaminate larger areas of the water, the good quality water further into the basin. So in looking at a project that would achieve this goal of intercepting and removing the brackish water, we felt that can we go one step further and not only preserve the quality of the basin, but can we turn this into a resource? And that's what the desalter does, is it allows us to pump the water, treat it, and turn it into a good quality water resource. Not only is that a good idea just to preserve the water in the basin, but also to produce a new source, but we're actually bound by state regulation to do this. The Regional Water Quality Control Board has a time schedule order requiring that a certain amount of salts be removed from the Cayugas Creek watershed by the end of next year. And obviously we've got a very limited amount of time to achieve that at this point. So we are not only moving forward with a good idea, but we're trying to meet regulations as well. The project, in maybe a brief summary, is, and I'll use acre feet as a measure. When we talk about annual water use, acre feet is a typical unit that's the equivalent of water covering 1 acre a foot deep, and 3 acre feet is about 1 million gallons of water. So the project, we have approval to pump 4,500 acre feet a year until the salty plume is removed. That'll be at least 25 years, if not longer, to achieve that. As we extract that water, we treat it. Some of that will go to waste. The salty water is discharged into a brine line, which is already existing in Lewis Road. And the remainder, the 3,800 feet, will be good quality water that we can serve our customers. The 3,800 feet is equivalent to about half of what we need to serve the demand in our customer, in the 2/3 of the city that we serve. The project does have the capability to be expanded to 9,000 acre feet, or at least as we design the project, that's the intent. The approval the city has is for 4,500, but the groundwater studies identified that there really is the ability and maybe the need to extract 9,000 acre feet a year to truly preserve the water quality in the basin and stop the plume from spreading. There is a possibility that Groundwater Management Agency, the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency, may want to have us expand the project and have others join later to achieve other goals. And so we want to build in flexibility into the project to be able to expand if necessary in the future. This is a local source of water that, and this will come up as we talk about the grant later, which makes it a more reliable source. We currently purchase water from the state, which is good quality water and is reasonably reliable, but there are, the Metropolitan Water District has identified there are emergency situations where we could be cut off from water. And if the state stopped delivering water, we would be in a difficult spot right now because we wouldn't have enough of a local resource to make up and serve the key demands of our service area. By having a local source that we control, we have a much more reliable source of water. And then not only that, but it's reliable as far as the cost, because the state will raise rates as they need to keep up with their costs, and some years those rates have gone up as much as 19% in 1 year. By having our own water source and our own project, we can keep our rates stable and have better control of what our ratepayers have to pay. So that in a nutshell identifies, the key reasons for the project and benefits. There was an environmental document that was certified for the project. It looked at a variety of issues and identified the project is safe and will not create impacts to the community. I will not go through each of these tonight unless there's questions about them, because as we get into one of the later items, you'll see that we are going to be providing an update to the environmental document that will be reviewed, circulated for the community to review later this year. And that will, in more detail, address all of these as they relate to the new site that we're considering. I just put this illustration up, or this photo up, to illustrate that people sometimes have a misconception of what a groundwater desalter looks like. And maybe I should even clarify, again, this is a groundwater desalter. We're going to remove water from the ground and desalinate. It's not an ocean desalinization project with ocean desalters. Those tend to be very large, very different treatment process because the salt removal is much greater. For a local water treatment facility, they're smaller. They can be designed to be incorporated into an urban area. This is an example of a project right in the middle of a residential area that was designed to look residential. And this is we've had some consultants submit proposals to design the project. In their proposals, we've receive some concepts of what they feel the project could be designed to look like to be compatible with the surrounding urban area. And you can see from these illustrations that this is not the concept that some people might have of a very large tanks and very industrial looking, and something that may not be as compatible with the surrounding urban area. The back to the plume, in order to have an effective project that is located strategically to remove the salts and intercept the future flows, there's a very limited area where those goals can be met, and that's shown in gold. So we need to locate the project somewhere in that area to be effective. And there are really only 3 parcels that are available that to look at. The environmental document identified, looking at those parcels, and there are 8 sites that we could locate the desalter. Each of these sites represent about 5 acres. Some of these are on the same parcel, so that's why we have 8 sites, even though we're talking about 3 or actually a 4th parcel if we look at location 7. Just going through these real quickly to understand why we've pretty much narrowed down to one option, and that is starting with sites 6 and 8. The environmental document just identified these as candidate areas and identified what the environmental effects would be. That's all the more it was tasked with doing. After the environmental document was certified, then we had to meet with regulatory agencies, property owners, and various entities to determine whether these sites could meet all the other tests necessary to be an eligible site for our desalter. And one of the agencies we had to meet with was LAFCO, the Local Area Formation Commission, that is charged with making sure that we're not competing with surrounding utilities and service areas. And we, in order for our project to be successful, need to serve water and sewer to our site. And in order to do that, we have to annex to the city, and LAFCO will only allow us to annex if we're adjacent to the city. So sites 6 and 8 are not adjacent to the city limits, therefore are no longer eligible sites. Site 7, it seems every time we looked at that, there was another California regulatory agency that identified they would not support the project there for various reasons, and so that site was eliminated. Sites 2, 3, and 4 are located on one property that's owned by the Oxnard Union High School District. We have been working, or had been working with the district to look to see if any of those sites could ultimately be a location that we could purchase land. Because the district has many steps they have to go through, just like we do when there's a property deal to be made, we both agreed that with our very aggressive schedule that we have to follow to meet that time schedule order, we just do not have the time to work through that process, and very well may not end up with the ability for the high school to decide that they want to sell the land. So with that in mind, we're really down to 2 sites. Site 1 is located right at the foot of the hill where Vista Camarillo is located, and we've heard from the residents there they really don't want a project that close to their community. And so that left us with Site 5 that will now be the subject of the first item on your agenda, and that is a term sheet. So Site 5 has been called that up till now because that's what was identified in the environmental document, but going forward I'm going to refer to it as the Meyerstein property, and that's because the owner of the property, Arnold Meyerstein, is the person that we will ultimately be dealing with to consider purchasing the land. That site, the parcel, is 40 acres, and the reason I make that point is that when we originally had looked at that property to consider whether the property owner would be willing to sell land to the city, there was a concern, a legitimate concern raised by the property owner that is in the county and it's zoned under county zoning. It's required to be 40 acres or greater, and if we were to purchase 5 acres, that would reduce the size of the parcel to 35 acres, less than 40. It would no longer be a conforming property in the county. And that means that the farmer would be allowed to continue farming the land, but if he wanted to make modifications, that could be restricted because of the non-conforming status. So the concern is that the farmer wants to eventually be able to build farm worker housing on his property and did not want entering into a deal with the city that would jeopardize his opportunity to do that. And incidentally, that's something that a lot of farmers are looking at now because the cost of housing is so great. In order for our agricultural economy in Ventura to survive, they need to find ways to create housing and are having a more difficult time finding the way to keep labor in Ventura County. So it's becoming a real issue that that farmers are very sensitive to and certainly do not want to give up their ability to meet those needs. So that basically prevented the city from being able to enter in the past into a relationship with the property owner to consider purchasing 5 acres. However, we've been able to identify where some of the concerns were. We've had meetings with the county. We've identified that the county has recognized the need for supporting farm worker housing, and they've modified some of their zoning requirements, basically suspended some of the requirements that would allow this site, even at less than 40 acres, to still be able to build farm worker housing, which took away the concerns, and there are other details too that we worked through, but we were able to go point by point and remove the concerns the farmer had on considering selling land to the city. And so the good news is we have now reached a set of deal points that going forward look like we have a pretty solid course to follow, that very cooperative willingness to cooperate on both sides to make this deal ultimately happen. And I'm not going to go through all the deal points that are memorialized in the term sheet that's in your packet, but I'll cover the key ones. And that is certainly from the city's standpoint, what we want to be able to achieve is the ability to buy 4.7 acres. The reason it's not a rounded 5 is just because of the shape of the parcel that we want to obtain just works out to be 4.7 acres. We also need some utility easements for access road and other utility access to the site. And then we also need some temporary construction area for stockpiling and so on during the construction of the project. So those are the needs we need to achieve. And I'm going to show you an illustration in a minute that identifies the location of these items. On the from the property owner's perspective, they need to know that there isn't going to be our purchase of the land is not going to disrupt their ability to move through the county to ultimately someday apply for and be able to build farm worker housing. And so to do that, we've identified some ways that actually, instead of being a deterrent, we can be of assistance to help them through that process. A couple examples would be that we would want to be at the table anyhow for any meetings they would have with the county, so we know what's being proposed and we can provide our input. But in doing so, we can make sure the right people are at the table at the county. We've already had some very successful meetings by meeting with the right people at the county to answer questions and be able to help the property owner feel comfortable that that we will not jeopardize their opportunity to build farm worker housing. So that's already been a positive step that's been achieved, and we would continue to support. The farm worker housing to be successful would prefer to be able to connect to our sewer system. There is water available in the county, but the county does not have sewer service anywhere near this parcel, and we do. And so there may be an opportunity for us to connect to our sewer system. Obviously, we aren't the final decision maker on that. LAFCO and other entities would be the county. But the indication is that that may be achievable, and certainly we would support that if it was something that the other entities or the regulatory agencies would support. And then, surprisingly, this is a topic that's come up again and again, and that is what's going to happen to the strawberry stand. I bring this up as well as there's been questions about access, and the site would be accessed from Lewis Road. We would take the dirt road access that currently provides service to the, or access to the strawberry stand, turn that into a fully improved road. So we would actually improve service to the strawberry stand. The next illustration will show better what I'm talking about. So this is an aerial photo showing the Meyerstein property outlined in gold. That's the 40 acres. The project would be at the south end. If you look at this square, that is the 4.7 acres. I'm now going to zoom in to show better that area highlighted. So what's shown in red is the 4.7 acres. That's the land we would purchase to site the desalter, and we would own that land. The blue area to the north would be a temporary area, 1 acre, that we would use during construction to help assist with staging the construction activity. And then what's highlighted in gold here are easements that we would obtain. Here's where we get the main access off of Lewis Road. This would be a secondary access, plus we could get utility service. We have to connect to the Brine line in Lewis Road, so we need those easements. This is the strawberry field. That would remain intact. This is the strawberry stand. It might have to move a little bit, but the parking would still be available and it would have an improved access. This would continue with our project to remain intact and would continue to be farmed as it is. The farm worker housing that the property owner proposes would probably be somewhere in this area, and then the farming operations they have to the north would continue with the remainder parcel. So basically that covers the background and the background as well for the first item, item A under Section 19. We are recommending that you authorize the city manager to sign a term sheet for the purchase of the Meyerstein property. What the term sheet does is lay out a solid understanding of the deal. However, we would not move forward with an official purchase offer at this point. We do need to update the environmental document, and we would wait until that process is completed because it might cause some adjustments to the way we would want to make the purchase offer. And then ultimately, once we have a certified environmental document, which I'll cover a little bit later on the next one of the next items on your agenda, that once we have that certified document, then we would make a formal purchase offer, which would pretty much reflect the deal points that you have in your packet now, plus whatever new information may come up between now and then, with the hope that we might be able to ultimately wrap up the deal by the end of the calendar year. So I'll pause at this point. We do have Public Works staff available to answer questions as well as I'm available. And so on item A, let's take that for your consideration at this point.
Perfect, thank you. Do we have questions of Mr. Fox or staff? And we're taking just item A, the term sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions?
I have one question.
Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, Tom, I know it's for my edifice and others perhaps. There was thorough studies done on the potential for all of these sites, and I know you worked and your staff has worked on them for a number of months. And this site that we've identified here tonight fits most, if not all, of the criteria I know that you've been looking for the duration of this. And I know there's been, pluses and minuses with all the sites, but the analysis was thoroughly done on every one of the potential sites for a number of months here. Is that a correct analysis?
Yes, I would even expand that to say it's a number of years. So when you look at the amount of information that we've had to collect over the years as far as groundwater studies, environmental studies, safety analysis, and so on, to meet with all the different regulatory agencies that we have to go through. We don't do this in a vacuum. I think on one of the previous presentations I put up the list of about a dozen agencies that we have to deal with. All those agencies require studies and information to be submitted to them. We have a wealth of information that, yes, has been collected, and all 8 of the sites that were included in the EIR have been evaluated based on all that information. What needs to occur, and that'll feed into the next item on your agenda, is we do, because we are looking at purchasing a different site than we originally had contemplated, there are some details that have to be established in an updated environmental document, but those are really information that's already available. We just have to repackage it to address the site. But you're right, there's been a lot of analysis, a lot of information that's been reviewed, prepared and reviewed by many agencies that have all come to the same conclusion that this project is ready to go.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? If not, comments?
Excuse me, I did have one comment to make. I wanted to emphasize a point that was made by Mr. Fox with regards to the term sheet. The recitals to the term sheet, which appear at big page A3, explain how the process would be moving forward, that there would be a CEQA analysis done. There's obviously already been an EIR done, and Mr. Fox will be explaining later that there will be a supplemental EIR as well. However, legally, there needs to be compliance with CEQA as a precondition to making a commitment to purchase the property. So this is the first step in the process with the term sheet. These recitals are all incorporated by reference into the business terms, section 1 on big page A4. So the process would be the term sheet, the completion of the environmental review, your consideration of the environmental document, make a determination as to whether to certify it or not, and then once CEQA has been complied with and confirming what Mr. Fox has said, it will come back to you for consideration of a purchase offer. So that's the sequence of how this would go forward, and I just want to make sure everyone understood that.
Thank you very much.
And just to clarify, Mr. Barrick, that SEIR will be circulated for public review.
Yes.
We're ready for
I
comments?
see no other questions or comments. So.
Okay, if we don't put it here, I don't have any idea where we would put it. We really need this project. This plume is contaminating our aquifer, as Mr. Fox explained. We've looked at all the other sites, and for one reason or another, nothing, they've all fallen through. I don't see where else we can put it. So I am hoping that the environmental study will not bring up any adverse conditions, and I would be happy to move to authorize the city manager to sign the term sheet with the Meyerstein Trust dated June 10th, 1993 for a potential purchase of the real property interests.
I'll second the motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please.
Just one little thing. Charlotte's correct. We are in, if we were to have a problem in the Delta, I mean, it's already estimated within 30 years. It could be next year. Because as you saw all that water that came down from Oroville, well, that took away some of your dikes up in the Delta. Your Delta are islands up there that the water comes around through the rivers and holds back the bay water. And what comes on the inside goes to our aquifer that's shipped here. If those break, we could be without water for 3 years while they repair it. That's what the estimate is from MWD and others that I've gone to their conferences and gone up and seen it, and that's what they're estimating. So we have a potential problem on our hands if we don't prepare. This makes us more prepared than any city in the county because they don't have plumes of stuff we thought were bad. Now it's good because we can use it and make it into good water, and at least as inexpensive as the other. And so I think today we've got to move forward.
Thank you for that comment, and Your Honor, I would even underscore that comment and keep that in mind because that'll come up again as we talk about a later item on your agenda with the application for a grant and the significance of that point.
Right.
If I could just follow up, Madam Mayor, I mean, I'm very strongly supportive of this item and the term sheet. The project is a win-win project for the residents of the city of Camarillo because not only does it accomplish, ultimately if it comes to fruition, knock on wood, not only does it accomplish an independent and quote-unquote new source of water, but it ensures redundancy, it ensures reliability, particularly if the delta goes down. And not only that, it's an environmental win-win because it takes care, it addresses the environmental degradation in the shallow aquifer waters, and cleans up that brackish groundwater, and that is a win for the environment. And not only is that instructive for Camarillo, that's also instructive for the Oxnard Plain as well, where there are many areas that have been intruded by seawater and are otherwise degraded. So this is a model project, and so I'm very strongly supportive. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Well, just since continuation of supply was brought up, I can remember in the 1994 earthquake, the tunnels that go through the mountains in Santa Susana Pass were damaged. And we were notified that there was the water was not going to be coming through for a certain length of time. They didn't know how long exactly, but they stressed that there was about a 2-month supply in Bard Lake. And that is our backup supply. This would stabilize that. Now, as it turned out, we were only without water coming through there. They were able to make the repairs at that time. I think it was 3 days or something. But a different type of earthquake, a stronger earthquake, it could damage it even more. And so this is a way to stabilize our supply in my mind.
Very good. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that does pass unanimously. So we move on to the next item, which is the professional service agreement with Cadence Environmental Consultants, WT 11-01, Pleasant Valley DeSalter Project.
Your Honor, yes, and this will be obviously a more brief presentation. As we identified, we need to do update the environmental work that has been completed. That's because Site 5 was not identified originally as the preferred site. Even though all the information is out there and available, it just needs to be repackaged in a way to focus now on this new site that we're looking at. And so that does require a supplemental EIR, and what that means is the environmental document that we have is fine. We don't have to modify or do anything to change that process that occurred. We just need to add to it. And that means we just need to take the information that's available, have an environmental consultant review it and format it, focusing on the site at the Meyerstein property. The hope is that we can move on a fairly aggressive schedule to complete that, where we would immediately start work on the supplemental if you approve this item. We would have the analysis completed next month, and then either late September or early October start the public review process, which means we circulate the document for 45 days. We have had a number of neighborhoods reach out to us and express an interest in wanting to track our project. We're keeping them informed, and we would probably even reach out to some other newer neighborhoods that are now closer to the new site. So we make sure that everybody that may have an interest in the project is aware of the public process and aware of the environmental analysis and all the issues that will be analyzed during that process. And then ultimately, we would be bringing the document forward hopefully in December for you to consider, and that would be a public hearing, and the public would have an opportunity at that point to weigh in on any thoughts they have, and as well as we plan at that time to have a pretty thorough presentation on the various concerns that people might have, such as safety and noise and issues that we've already analyzed, but want to make sure that we're addressing those as well with this site. And then ultimately, we need a consultant that's committed to that aggressive schedule. We have a consultant that we had worked with in the past that prepared the original environmental document. Unfortunately, consultants are busy, and it's kind of hit and miss. If you get lucky and you can find a consultant that you just catch right between the right time between projects, that they are willing to move on an aggressive schedule. Unfortunately, the consultant we had worked with before is pretty backlogged. However, there's another consultant, which is Cadence Environmental Consultants, that we have a really good working relationship with. They're very knowledgeable on city procedures, but they're also knowledgeable on desalters, and in fact are currently preparing an environmental document for another desalter project in the area. And as they've also read our environmental document, our groundwater studies. They're very familiar with our project, so they can hit the ground running. They know how we operate, how we like to reach out and engage the public, which I know we had a misstep on that earlier. They're good at watching our back and making sure a good job is done with public outreach. And they're also very cost effective and are willing in this case to be able to meet a very aggressive schedule, the one that I laid out. So with that, we're very confident that they're the right consultant to help us move forward, and for that reason we're recommending that you authorize the city manager to sign a contract with Cadence Environmental Consultants for $17,960, and they're ready to move.
Questions? Mr. Kildee?
Yes, Tom, and just reiterate, they are aware of the schedule, and they're convinced that they can meet it.
The schedule you have is actually based on a conversation with them and what they feel they can commit to.
Okay. Mr. Tremblay? Oh, no.
Make a motion.
Excuse me. I have one question and one request. I want to be sure that this time that we go beyond our standard in all the notification process, that we make that a wide, broad umbrella so that we make sure that we don't get, and as you mentioned, get caught with perhaps missing anyone who should be involved.
Absolutely, we share that goal, obviously, and always have. We just, missed that before, and that's one of the reasons Cadence is I think, a good recommendation, is they've worked with us on a lot of other environmental processes that they know how to reach out to the community. They live in the community. The previous consultant wasn't as familiar with that goal that we have. So we already have identified the areas that we know are anywhere close to having an interest in this project, and we plan to reach out to all of those areas.
And my request might be that if you find that there is a lot of interest, I think a town hall meeting wouldn't be a bad idea as we work through the process, again, to give them that focused opportunity to ask their questions and work through it as we work through it instead of at the end.
You guys are doing a really good job of setting up the next items. So we will not only, and it takes resources to be able to do that, and that's one of the things we're looking at, is making sure we have the project management consulting help to be able to, as we go through the environmental process, if we find we need some of those extra meetings, that we can set up meetings to provide public outreach, get the information out there. So absolutely, that is something we're looking to achieve.
Right.
Just to follow on that, Madam Mayor, I mean, it would ordinarily be, well, no, let me retract that. There may well be a public meeting, as indicated in the staff report, in connection with consideration of the supplemental EIR, correct?
We would have a public hearing at the end, correct?
Mm-hmm. I think what...
no, I'm not getting at that. I'm getting at a prior public meeting.
I think what Councilmember Tremblay is getting to is, in the scope, the consultant did account for that if there is a separate meeting beyond just the public hearing, they are available to assist us with that as well, because certainly we need them to be able to respond to questions about the work that they've performed. It's just that beyond that, there's the need to, develop other visual items and things to help portray the information in a very understandable way that the environmental consultant may not prepare, but our project managers could help with.
Because I read that one, I thought that one was another meeting in the council setting versus a town hall meeting, but maybe I just assumed that as I read it. I read it differently. Okay. Oh, okay. Well,
I'll just tell you.
We all get there in the end.
I'll just tell you their impression was they didn't really know what the forum would be. It could be a separate meeting with the council ahead of a public hearing. It could be a town hall meeting. It could be a community meeting like we've had before. They're adaptable and very flexible to whatever format we feel will work best.
Perfect. And we've been working on this so long, I know you're going to give it your utmost attention as we work through these next few months. So.
Madam Mayor, would the timing be right to make a motion? Then I would move to authorize the city manager to sign a professional services agreement with Cadence Environmental Consultants for an amount not to exceed $17,960.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not, please vote. And that does pass unanimously. Okay, we move on to item C, which is a professional service agreement with Water Systems Consulting, WT 1101 North Pleasant Valley DeSalter Project.
So this will be a combination of, describing what the assistance is that we need, but it'll be a good opportunity just to look back and cover some of the key accomplishments in the last 6 months or so, and just to help provide an update to council and the community. The DeSalter project has different significant phases in the overall delivery of a project. There was the approval phase, which unfortunately took years because we were dealing with many regulatory agencies, but we achieved that. And then we moved into the next phase, which was what we call pre-design, where we have some studies and various efforts that we have to complete before we're ready to go to a formal design. And we had hired we refer to them as WSC, they're Water Systems Consulting. We've used different water consultants in the past, and we found that WSC was really very effective to work with, and so them to help us with project management of the pre-design phase, which is essentially wrapping up, and the budget for that has pretty well been expended. So if we're now going to move forward into a design phase or any next steps that we move forward with, we need to consider continuing the relationship with WSC to have them continue to provide project management support. Just looking back at a couple of the key accomplishments that during the pre-design phase is one of the major deliverables that the Groundwater Management Agency, Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency, required of us is to deliver a monitoring and contingency plan which had to be in a format that their board would be willing to approve, and they had tried for years to decide on what that format should be, so it was no small task to develop this in a way that would be approved, and we got it approved, so that was a big accomplishment. The design process is more extensive than we would for most capital projects, and that's going to be, I'll cover that in more detail with one of the next items on your agenda, but we're basically there ready to consider a design contract, and there's quite a process that led us to this point. We want to be able to apply for federal grants. In order to do that, the first step is we have to demonstrate that our project is even eligible to apply for grants, and that step requires that we submit a technical study to the federal government. And as we're aware, the federal government loves paperwork, and so that technical study was 1,300 pages. Now, some of that was the environmental document and the groundwater studies and work that had been completed, but a lot of it was new information we had to reformat in a manner that the federal government can review. That's been completed. It's been passed through the first review, and they said it's a very thorough document that looks very good. There's just a few questions that we're responding to, but the indication is that we will get the technical study approved, and we will then be eligible for federal grants. And then, as you're aware, we've been trying to find a location to land on to locate our project that has taken longer than expected and more effort than expected, and a lot of the budget was expended on that effort using our project management consultant as well. But we're there. We've now successfully found a site that seems to meet all of the requirements, including a willing seller that we've reached deal points with. So that's a major accomplishment. So with that said, we feel we're ready to keep moving to the next step, and in order to do that, we need the project management assistance. And because WSC is so familiar with the city and our procedures, what our staff reports look like, and they're also very knowledgeable on water projects, we feel it definitely makes sense to continue the relationship with them. And so we are recommending that you authorize the city manager to sign an agreement with WSC to provide project management services to take us completely through the design period up until the beginning of construction.
Any questions of Mr. Fox? Mr. Kildee.
Tom, I want to ask again, in your professional opinion, are you convinced that this organization can meet and or exceed our timeline?
They've been involved with us, and they understand the aggressive schedule that we're under, and our experience has been that they are quick to respond more so than other consultants we've used in the past. So we're very confident that if there's a consultant out there that can meet the aggressive schedule, this is the consultant.
Anyone else? Mr. Tremblay.
Mr. Fox, just looking at the contract itself, I'm sorry, looking at the proposal itself. So for example, in the staff report on page 2, one of the items, and Madam Mayor, this goes to what you were looking at before in terms of preparation and implementation of a public outreach program. When I look at the proposal from WSC on page 2 under task 1, is that would that be included under the general project management tasks? Let me try it a different way. You know what? Let me rephrase. The number of hours for an associate engineer, for example, on this, or the total number of hours, total labor hours under task number 1 are 538 hours. With respect to task 1 and then task 4 on design coordination review, did WSC provide some sort of breakout that staff reviewed of the hours that were going to be spent that provided you a comfort level that the services were going to be performed efficiently?
Yes, that is correct, and it's a fairly detailed spreadsheet that may not be in a format like this that would be really understandable in a document that the general public would try and understand. But if you have any specifics, the Public Works staff did work closely with WSC on developing and going through the scope with them, and they might be able to respond to any detailed questions you would have.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just a lawyer, not a Public Works staff, so I don't have that depth of knowledge. But I just wanted to be sure, given the very large amount of hours that staff, or that our professional staff thought that these hours were efficient, because it's a lot of money for this agreement. There's another one down the line here we're going to be talking about that's a lot more. I just want to make sure that from an efficiency standpoint, staff was satisfied with the hours that were being proposed.
Yes, we are.
Okay, and then second question is, would public outreach, what we talked about in the prior agenda item, would that be included in task number 1?
It's in the proposal, and I don't recall if it was embedded in task 1 or not. I don't know. Dave?
That is an element of the overall, the general PM task. We haven't obviously identified the specifics of what they would do for that type of outreach, and that we haven't even identified the exact meeting. So those types of services would fall under that.
But those hours are in there somewhere.
Correct.
Because they're indicated in the staff letter. That's why I asked.
Right.
I couldn't take the staff letter and juxtapose it against the proposal
right.
task.
Again, we're talking about a 1-year time period here for the design effort, for them to help us out with this project management through that effort. And we feel like these number of hours provided here will allow for those types of services and to be tailored, for each specific need. Yeah.
Maybe another way and I appreciate that answer, because it's I think indicative of one of the benefits of working with WSC is we've worked with them enough that we understand each other, so we know and they know when we may be getting, this project takes twists and turns, and sometimes with a twist or turn that affects budget. But we've also been able to work with them in the past to adjust hours and approaches to still deliver, but keep on budget. So they're adaptable, and they work with us, and we know how to work together to adjust to be able to make modifications, knowing that it's very difficult at this point, looking a year out and trying to imagine every possible hour of work between now and a year from now and where it's going to be spent, that obviously there's going to have to be some adjustments made along the way. So that's one of the key issues when we hire a consultant, is how adaptable and how flexible are they to adjust along the way, and that's what we know WSC works very well with us. So we're confident that with the budget we can adjust as we need to stay on budget and still deliver what needs to be delivered.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Your Honor, I'll move to authorize the city manager to sign a professional services agreement with Water Systems Consulting Incorporated for an amount not to exceed $400,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not, please vote. And that does pass unanimously. Our next item is the application to California Department of Water Resources for Water Desalination Grant Program, WT1101 North Pleasant Valley Desalter Project.
Your Honor, our desalter project is estimated to cost $30 million, and we have the budget available with our current $5 million grant to be able to pay for that. However, and in doing so, we can achieve rate stability and not have to, increase our rates significantly like other agencies are having to. However, by seeking grants, both at the federal and state level, our hope is that by obtaining another grant, then we can actually offset some of our contribution we have to make to the project. Since this really has more than just a local benefit, it has a regional benefit. We should have some regional dollars going to the project as well. And if we can achieve that, then that helps our ratepayers, where we may even be able to reduce our rates. But that's only if we're successful in getting a significant grant. And so that's one reason we're pursuing the federal grant, but we have a new opportunity that's come available in California through Proposition 1, and it's state funding for a variety of water resources, and they've set aside $73 million specifically for the construction of desalter projects. There's also money for planning, and design and things of that nature, but we feel that we're positioned well to seek money for construction, and I'll go in a little more detail on that. So this is a grant opportunity that has come up recently, and we found that we match up well with it. There are two key goals or objectives that the state has, and the first one has to do with basically what our project is designed to accomplish, and that is to preserve existing water supplies and create a supplemental water supply, and that's exactly a goal matching up perfectly with the goal of the state. The other goal, and that's why I drew attention to the comments you made earlier, is that we create a reliable source of water, particularly for droughts and emergencies, and because we use state water and the concerns of what can happen to our access to state water during droughts and emergencies, this project would create local reliability, and that's the other key objective that we match up perfectly. So knowing that we're matching up well, we've already initiated work on what we need to submit for a grant application, but in order to do so, we need your approval to submit that application. The maximum that we can apply for is $10 million. And that means if there's a $73 million source, that there's going to be at least 8 projects out there that get funding. And when you look at around California, the number of efforts that are underway to be ready to construct in the near future a groundwater desalter, there probably aren't that many projects out there. By being ready to move into the formal design, we're positioned perfectly to compete for this money, and so we feel we have a reasonable chance to be able to pick up some funds. Now, we don't know if they're going to grant anything up to the maximum or how it'll be granted, but we do hope to be able to secure some state funds through this effort. The fact that we already received some state funds through another grant source does not disqualify us or diminish our ability to apply for this grant. And so we do recommend that you give grant authority to the city manager for us to apply to the Department of Water Resources for a $10 million grant.
Perfect. Any questions? Mr. Morgan.
I guess you're ready to go with that application because you got September 1st looming in a short distance here, so I think you're probably ready for it, right?
That's correct, and that's why we're here tonight, is we just need your authority to submit the application.
Good. Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, Tom, if we apply for the maximum amount of the grant, is it all or nothing? In other words, could they approve a lesser amount than the $10 million, or is the $10 million what you apply for is what you're invariably going to get?
It's variable. It's up to them. We will apply for the max because we feel that our project justifies an application for that amount, but they may very well decide to split cut the pie in different slices, and we may get the 10 million, we may get something less than that, we may not get anything at all. But what we've seen in the past is if there's more applications than money available, they will sometimes discount everybody's request. Other times they just award to the ones they feel are most qualified. So it's really hard to say. That's something that we'll learn after the application is submitted, and as we hear more, we'll certainly report back.
Tom, as recall earlier when we were studying this a few months ago, there's only a handful of people out there who even can apply for it, because we're talking about desal plant not on the ocean, but desal plant of brine water and so on. As I know, there's 2 in Orange County for sure, like we are looking to do, and there's one in a place called Lindsay. I don't know of any others besides Camarosa, a small one, but they're limited. We should be in good shape.
That's what we're hoping. We feel that, that what you're hearing is similar to what we're hearing, that there aren't a huge number of projects ready to go out there, and hopefully we're capitalizing on a perfect opportunity at the right time.
Good.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to compliment staff on their presentation. To me, this is a no-brainer. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to apply to the California Department of Water Resources for a Round 4 water desalination grant program funding for the North Pleasant Valley desalter project, WT 11-01.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that does pass unanimously. Okay, we have one more item, but before we go to that one, I have a question for you. Has anyone gone back to see exactly when we started this? Can you tell us on what date we started all of this? And if you don't know it tonight, I would be really interested to know exactly what that date was.
6 for sure, but almost started studying.
She must have a date. She wouldn't come all the way down here to tell us she doesn't know.
So we started back in 2005, and actually even before that, because the glimmer of an idea came back even before I got here with Bob Westdyke. So that would have happened like in 2002. And we had a pilot study in 2005, 06, 07, 08. And we stopped for about a year and a half, and then we started it up again in 2008.
Because it rained.
2009, I'm sorry.
So probably about 20, maybe sometime we can figure it out. Maybe we could find somewhere in the records. It'd be interesting to see the first time we really talked about it. But we do know that it got Mrs. McGovern here, so that's an important thing.
So when we look back at all the effort that it's taken to get to this point, I now realize why Bob came up with the idea and then retired.
That's right.
We need to remember to invite him to the groundbreaking.
We absolutely do. But boy, anyone that says we rushed into this one. Okay, we have one more left, and it's a professional service agreement with Brown and Caldwell, WT 1101, North Pleasant Valley Desalter Project.
Your Honor, and maybe just to build on what we were just talking about as far as schedule, I think I need to reiterate or emphasize that on projects of this nature, where we are really going beyond the call that a city would be expected to meet in dealing with just our local water resource, we are really looking at something that has regional benefit that certainly serves Camarillo, but it serves the region beyond. And when you start looking at a scope like that, you're dealing with so many state agencies that control our destiny. We don't. And the types of things they look for in the process it takes to get their approval, I think that just demonstrates the fortitude you need to have and the time commitment you need to be willing to put in to make it through that process. And so, with all those years of effort, I highlight that to point out that we have reached a major milestone tonight. The items before you are all the things we've needed in place to feel confident that we're ready to go to the next step. And this is where we really do start to kind of take control of our destiny and move away from the control that all the other agencies have. And then we move into formal design. That's when we start putting together the construction documents that enable us to go out to bid. And once we're under construction, there's no turning back. So we've really reached, and that's what this item, I think, memorializes, is that we've reached a major decision point here, and that is it time to move forward to design? And quite honestly, we're already on a very tight schedule and actually have exceeded some of the deadlines that we were trying to hit, that we're going to have to really work hard to get catch up and meet, get close to the deadlines that we have. So for that reason, I am very happy to report that we are here tonight able to recommend to you that we move forward into design, and to do so we want to make sure we enter into a relationship with a consulting firm that's going to help us get there. And so that's what I want to just touch on a few points related to that. The process we follow to hire any consultant for designing any capital project is extensive, because we want to make sure we hire the right firm. But in particular with this project, not only large in scale, but also very specialized, we want to make sure we had a consultant that really understood how to design desalters, not just water treatment projects, but the type of water treatment that we've learned that we need, and we learned that through a pilot study. We built a small plant, 12 years ago or whenever it was, and that's given us a lot of information to know the kind of project we need and the kind of consultant that has the expertise to get us to get to construction. So to start with, we went through an extra step we don't normally take, and that's a pre-qualification process where we put together what we need and have consultants give us their qualifications and enough information to demonstrate to us they are qualified to do this type of project. And then looking at the qualified through that list, identifying the firms that are qualified, then we picked the top 3 that we felt were the most qualified, and then invited them to submit formal proposals that then provides a lot more detail on how they feel they can deliver the best design for our project. And so we went through several steps to ensure those 3 firms that submitted proposals were truly aware. We had meetings collectively with all the consultants together to understand our project, to make sure they really understood what they were submitting proposals on. We had an expert panel put together that includes a variety of sources and experts, including we already have identified the firm that's going to operate the plant. We had them help select who they thought would be the best design team to get us there, because they ultimately have to operate the plant once it's built. And so we certainly had help in the process to identify who we felt would be the best consultant. And then we had to meet with them because to negotiate a price, and that's a typical step when you identify consulting services. It's not a bid process. In California, it actually requires that we identify the most qualified firm first, and then we see what their price proposal is and negotiate with them from there. And the challenge is that, the consultants are getting busy out there and are going up. And yet we have a budget that we want to try and hold to. So one of the tools we have to help try and keep the price on target with our budget is when a consultant submits a proposal, they're assuming some risk. They're telling us we're going to deliver this end product, whatever it takes to get there, for this price, not knowing for sure all the nuances and again, twists and turns that can occur along the way. So they build in risk value for that risk into their proposal. By sitting down and identifying where some of those risk areas are and further defining and explaining to them what our expectations are, we're able to remove some of that unknown and reduce the risk that they would take on. And with that, they can then tighten their proposal. And through that negotiation, we were able to get a proposal, as you see in the packet, just under $3 million, which hits our target for us to stay on budget. So it was a very extensive process, but through that, it was actually very helpful, because I think we forged a good relationship with the consultant to understand them, and they understand us. And so we feel very confident that that they're the right team. And you have the name in your packet. I'll get to it in a moment. But the expectation is not only that we get a good product out of them, a good design that's going to allow us to construct a project, that moves through construction fairly efficiently without a lot of change orders and hold up. But they've identified that they can meet our aggressive schedule and have a design available this time next year, with our hope that we go to bid and can award a contract by, say, October or November. With that, then we are recommending that you consider an agreement, contract with Brown and Caldwell. They demonstrated that they are very qualified, very knowledgeable on designing water treatment projects, particularly the kind we're looking for. They identified some ways that we can move through the design process fairly time efficiently, as well as do some things in design that can help us move through construction on a fairly aggressive schedule to ultimately deliver an operational project, hopefully by the end of 2019. So with that, we do recommend that you grant the city manager authority to award a contract to Brown and Caldwell in the amount of $2,917,518.
Thank you very much. And before we go to questions, so I don't forget to do it, I just want to thank you, Mr. Fox, Mrs. McGovern, Mr. Kotzel, all the staff members that have worked on this for, what are we up to, 15, 16 years?
16 years.
Yep.
You've all done
Long
a great
time.
job. Tenacity is maybe one of the words that come to mind. You didn't give up. And it's been quite a dance, but hopefully we've gotten there. Do we have any questions on this item?
Your Honor, I'd like to move professional services agreement with Brown and Caldwell, North Valley. If someone else asks questions, I'm going to make a motion anyway.
Okay, well, now I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay, that's going to die for... Yeah, that's going to die for lack of a second at the moment. That doesn't mean you can't do it in a minute, but we have a question. Mr. Kildee?
Yeah, again, Tom, this is a big number, and I know I was pleased that there are, pre-qualified, applicants that made a bid proposal on this. But I want to ask you again, in your your engineering experience too, whether or not you feel that this company can adhere to the type timeline that we've got here. I was pleased to see that not only they have local experience, but they also have out-of-state experience in some relatively larger projects. I think I know what the answer is, but I'd like for you to respond to that in your professional opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. We feel confident that that they're aware of the aggressive schedule. They helped us actually develop that schedule, and that they're committed to meet it. And the reason that I can feel confident saying that is that through the negotiation process, we didn't just have, like maybe a smaller project where we meet once, they submit a proposal, and we bring a recommendation forward. We've had many meetings, multiple meetings, where we've worked together to truly understand the project, how we work together to get the design done in an efficient way, a cost-efficient, time-efficient way. And through that, I know they've learned in detail what we're looking for, and they've committed to meet that. So we've had certainly enough interaction with them that I say confidently that they're the right team.
And did I hear right, Tom, that they actually helped you devise this schedule? Did I hear?
That's correct. Yeah, we asked them to submit an initial schedule with their proposal, and then as part of the negotiation, we work out the details on ultimately getting us to the August 2018 deliverable.
Thanks.
Does that answer any other questions? Yes. Mr. Timbley.
I do have some questions, and I apologize I didn't have a chance to ask them in advance, Mr. Fox. And first of all, I would add creativity and adaptability to the kudos to you and Ms. McGovern and to staff on all of this work. I mean, it's just been an extraordinary level of effort, and I really appreciate it. And I don't think I can say that enough. I do have some questions, though. And a couple of them are process questions and a couple of them are contract questions. And let me caveat this by saying that I've had the pleasure of working with Brown and Caldwell in a professional capacity on behalf of clients on other projects, and they are a highly skilled firm, and I think they're a good choice. That said, this is a very large amount of money, so I have a couple of drill-down questions. First of all, from a process standpoint, how this was done. The staff letter indicated that 3 firms submitted proposals, all were subsequently interviewed, and the detailed project approach and scope of work were supplied, and then a fee in a separate envelope. From a process standpoint, can you describe whether or not the proposed fees were looked at, or were they put off to the side and staff selected and ranked first the consultants and then looked at the fees? Do Do you understand the question?
I absolutely do, and
Thank you.
And you're testing me to see if we followed the guidelines that the state sets out.
Well, I didn't say it that way, but yes, I am.
Exactly.
Yes, we actually had the team, so it wasn't just city staff, it was the team, again, of experts, look at the qualifications of each of the firms and score based on those qualifications. And Brown Caldwell scored the highest and came in as identified as the most qualified. And then we looked at the price and realized that, we then needed to meet with them to discuss that as a follow-up item. But the scoring and the qualifications were evaluated first.
Can you indicate whether from a pricing standpoint their pricing was close to or in the ballpark, how it ultimately came out?
It is now in the ballpark.
Pardon me?
It is now in the ballpark.
It is now in the ballpark.
They are a very qualified firm, and sometimes you pay a premium for that. And again, by working with them to identify areas of risk and reducing that, we were able to get the price in line with what we have budgeted.
And now in the ballpark, let me finish the phrase, relative to the other firms that proposed. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is this in the form, this contract, in the form of the city's standard professional services agreement with all of the options normally available to the city should any circumstances change?
Yeah, yes, it is, and our standard contract does have termination provisions in it if that should become necessary for some reason. For example, if the project isn't, going forward for some reason. But obviously, I think the contemplation is if the project goes forward, there won't be a need to address that issue.
Right. Occupationally, I always think of the other way, and so I just want to
you plan
up the question.
You plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Right. A couple more questions, if I may, Madam Mayor. On the assumptions, first of all, this is the baseline contract is for $2,917,518. In the transmittal letter from Brown and Caldwell on big page 4, E4, there are 16 tasks and then several optional tasks. And what I wanted to ask you is, do you contemplate at this time, we're not signing a contract for any of the optional tasks. The city has the ability to call on Brown and Caldwell to perform those one or more of those optional tasks. Do you anticipate at this time that the city would do so? And I'm specifically thinking, for example, of optional tasks on page 10, optional task 2, which is a study or a coordination with Calleguas Municipal Water District relative to tying into the brine line on Lewis Road. In other words, so let me just rephrase and shorten it. Do you think we're going to ask Brown and Caldwell to do some of the optional tasks ultimately?
I'm going to have Ms. McGovern come down to confirm, but I don't believe at this point we're expecting they would have to do any of the optional tasks. Those were identified as backup in case, for example, with Calleguas, I believe they actually want to design the connection. And so we've built in budget to pay them for that. But if for some reason they decide we can expedite it by doing it ourselves, then we may look at that later on. But it was identified really as backup if we need it, but not expected to be needed at this point. So, Lucy, is there any item that we?
No,
is that
no,
correct?
that was probably the only item that may have the more likelihood of being added to the work scope. Only if it seems more efficient if our engineer designs the structure that ultimately gets owned by Calleguas. So typically they own it, they construct it and own it. But in this case, they're willing to consider us building it for them. So, but
and I understand why.
That is considered an optional task because we haven't completed those negotiations with Calleguas.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's a fair answer. Thank you.
I follow up on that one, but you've already budgeted to pay Calleguas to do it, So
Yes.
it's just a matter of
It's in
moving
the
the money
over.
over,
It's in the
so-
overall project budget.
Yeah, it's really a question, it's going to get accomplished, it just is a question of who's going to do it, and we've already budgeted for it, which is the important thing. And the next is really an engineering question, too, and that is on the list of assumptions on big pages 5 and 6, the basis for level of effort, there are 31 conditions in attachment A. Is it staff's professional opinion, is staff comfortable with all of the 31 conditions in attachment A as they've been set forth? Is there a high degree of comfort with all of those conditions?
Yes. Those conditions and assumptions were based on the conversations we had during the negotiations of this work scope. So those were the understanding and more for clarification of what the expectations of a work scope were.
Okay. And then finally, this is a completely unfair question, but look into the future after post-design, and assuming, we're going forward. Typically, the design engineer would not be involved in construction management, but would be retained, I would think, during a construction phase to ensure that the design, that the construction is going pursuant to design. But have we had any discussions to date with anyone about construction management? I guess that's kind of getting the cart before the horse. Or let me rephrase. We wouldn't expect Brown and Caldwell to do the type of CM work, correct?
No, but they are going to be the engineer of record, so we may need to hire them to retain them for
Okay.
ensuring that their design is being built to their specifications.
Right, and we have WSC doing a constructability review too, I believe, right?
So that's separate
and
than the
which would then
construction
follow.
management portion.
But again, during the construction phase, we've built in budget for construction management and design support.
Right, so we're not, right, this is not an extra amount, so, okay. That answers all of my questions, and again, kudos to you, because this, I know just even having this one contract in place represents an awful lot of work.
The thought was that if there's so many unknowns at this time that the design support efforts would maybe be more specific as you get closer into completing the design effort. So that's when we would go back to Brown and Caldwell. We have a scope, we just don't have a dollar amount fully negotiated.
Right, and that's not atypical in a circumstance like this. I don't want people to think, in my experience, I don't want people to think, oh, wait a minute, this is too loosey-goosey. It's not. I mean, there's only a certain amount you can really tie down, and there's a certain amount that has to float. Generally speaking, right?
It just seems that if especially with this project, that as long as there's some unknowns, you get added risk, and so it costs some money. So if you try to narrow it down, complete it as much as you can ahead of time, and get more, lower that risk in making sure that you're meeting deadlines, meeting all your expectations, and that's the time that you would go ahead and negotiate the next portion of the work that it would be necessary.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Got a
Comments?
comment.
Mrs. Craven.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Tremblay. Brown and Caldwell is a very well-known, very reputable company, and I think they'll do a good job for us. This is a very large contract, the largest I remember for a design of anything. And so, Mr. Fox, as you were going through and talking about how you negotiated the price, all I could think of is Stan Daly. And I want to make sure I get my fist just in the right position and say, no change orders.
Not sure about that.
That's pretty firm.
He used to have an orange button that he'd wear on those nights.
Wishful thinking. Any other comments?
Your Honor, I'll make a motion. Do you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to make a quick one, and so much of the design obviously is in the function of it, but when we talked about having neighbors and what it was going to look like, this was the company that their illustration, we all said it looked like a winery or something instead of a desalter plant. So
Maybe the church will object to that.
oh, that's true. I shouldn't say that. It looks like something else, like a mission or something. Maybe they don't like that either. Anyway, but I think just that flavor of that picture that they gave us, to me, tells them that they have a bit of an understanding of who they're dealing with and the community that they're putting it in. So besides what's inside the actual mechanics of it all, I think the pictures paints 1,000 words. Mr. Kildee, you'd like to make a motion?
I'll move that we authorize the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Brown and Caldwell in the amount of $2,917,518.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Not, please vote. And that does pass unanimously. This is when the drums should roll and the bugle sings. Thank you all so much for getting us to this point. So we will now go back to, I believe the only item other than our closed session is back to new business. So Mr. Trimbley, would you like to start tonight?
Madam,
I'm sorry, I forgot
wouldn't you
the
like to call the city manager first?
Oh, no, yes. City manager, you have anything? No. Okay. Say I knew that. City attorney?
I have no items.
Okay, sorry about that. Mr. Trimley, now it's your turn.
Oh, gosh, that was anticlimactic. Okay.
You tried.
I know I have three short things if I can. In last Sunday's Star op-ed pages, I thought that there were, I would ask Jeffrey to copy two articles, our city clerk to copy two articles for council members. One is an editorial entitled, bless you, Hate Has No Home in Our Community, and I thought it was quite well written and thoughtful. And the second is an op-ed piece. There's been a little dueling going on in the op-ed pages of the Star recently relative to SOAR. I think started by a CSUCI professor who was writing about SOAR. But this op-ed piece is by Carl Morehouse, who's an urban planner who used to be on the Ventura City Council and has a number of interesting observations in it that I think are worthwhile reading. And in particular, there are sections of this op-ed which I think are enlightening. And I'll just quote one paragraph from it. The jobs, and Mr. Morehouse is, the article speaks for itself, but it says the jobs that are growing in our area and many of them that will support us aging baby boomers simply do not pay enough to supply affordable housing to live here. Thus, we are losing lots of potential employees because they are moving out of the area for more affordable housing. And that resonated with me. And so if you haven't had a chance to review that yet, that would be great. Finally, I didn't know this until recently, but apparently Congress, way back, right around the time I was born, I think, passed well, I guess they passed some form of congressional action encouraging people to study the United States Constitution, and they designated something called a Constitution Week. And that actually has been followed up by President Bush and President Obama and others. And I will confess to you that I have not read our policy with respect to any form of proclamations or anything like that. But what I would like is if perhaps we could consider encouraging folks to observe Constitution Week and take a look at the Constitution. It's not just because I had one full year of constitutional law, which I don't want to repeat readily again from law school. You know, I'm sure Mr. Pierick has his own opinions on that. But notwithstanding that, I think a study of the Constitution, and this isn't coming from a partisan or a political, it's coming from a constitutional standpoint and how important it is to us and to our country. And I'm hoping we can find some way as a council perhaps to encourage that. So,
wait, is that a given week or is it?
It's the week of September 17 through 23. Is what I understand. I don't know that we've ever done proclamations or anything like that, but
well, it isn't a local thing, but our policy specifies
not.
like a letter from the mayor to be read at a council meeting.
Right. So I'm wondering if we might consider that something to consider.
Especially right now when there's so much debate going on in the world.
Well, there is, and it's not a very level, but it's all right. But and again, it's
Affects all
not.
of
This
us.
isn't meant in a partisan way or a political way. It's just meant. It's good to be reminded of that and to encourage folks to study the Constitution. And those are my 3 comments.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Mr. Morgan.
Well, I've had a tough 3 weeks. I had an eye operation on the 8th, and we'd already scheduled a fishing trip to Alaska months before that. So even though I was limited, I can't pull up anything more than 10, 15 pounds. We caught a lot of salmon and things like that. Had a good time, but I was always suffering a little bit because I can see. And so like right now, my eyes really tired. But it's getting better every day. It's supposed to go back to 2020 within the next couple weeks. So the only thing I attended was with Charlotte, and we attended the foundation,
Ranch
House Foundation meeting, and discussed the budget a lot. And I've got to tell you, they're doing a great job. I can really appreciate that foundation now, because with Daly there and others, it's making it run well. And so there should be no complaints on what they're doing and how they're running. That's it.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Craven.
Well, I didn't have surgery 3 weeks ago. I had surgery a week ago, and so I only attended a couple things, but one of them was the Camarillo Ranch Foundation board meeting with Mr. Morgan a couple weeks ago, and I also attended a policy committee meeting, and the policy that we addressed at that meeting was on your agenda tonight. I got an interesting call from Phyllis Anderson, who said a lot of council members were going to know her name. And she asked for us to think about when we are going to put a 2 to 3 story parking garage on Ventura Boulevard. Not giving my comments, I just told her I would pass the word along. I was wondering, what on earth is that giant-sized tent in Home Depot parking lot? I mean, it takes up almost the whole, quarter of it?
We recently approved a outdoor sales special event permit and the staging for that.
Okay. Also, I noticed today that they are re-roofing the Sholey House. There's been every once in a while, people come and ask us what's up with it. I don't know what's going to happen to it, but it's going to have a good roof. It looks like they're putting, it's all loaded up on the top.
The Sholey House?
The Sholey House.
On Springville Bridge.
I'll look into that because I'm not aware of a permit for that roofing, but I'll investigate.
Well, we've complained about how the water's going through and ruining it, so if they don't have a permit, help them.
Why would they put a roof on then?
Because it's all, the roofing materials are loaded on top.
Yeah.
Also, on the same trip down Earl Joseph, I noticed that with most of our turn signals, if there's nobody in the left turn lane, it doesn't turn green. The arrow doesn't turn green. And so sitting there at Las Posas, Earl Joseph, Las Posas, Crestview, the arrow turned green, but there was, and as long as I've been sitting there, nobody had been sitting there. So I was wondering if that one, for some reason, is different than our other turn signals?
No, it shouldn't be in either an anomaly, or we'll definitely take a look at that. So was it when you were headed westbound?
I was heading westbound. And so the left to go up to Crestview turned on when mine came on.
So you were headed eastbound, actually.
Yes, you're right. I was eastbound.
Okay.
Coming from the west.
Gotcha. But in that direction, if it turned green for somebody
it turned green,
Crestview. Okay.
and then, I don't know, I didn't wait to find out what happened after that.
Okay.
I left, but I noticed I thought, that's odd. It turned green, an arrow turned green, and there's nobody there.
Right. Yeah, if there's something that needs to be reset with the detectors, that could be the case, so we'll check that.
Okay. And finally, I noted it appeared several days, but on the 28th of July, I noticed Charlotte Hofer's obituary, and Charlotte, I believe, was on the Camarillo Planning Commission for 8 years. Yep. So I would like to ask if we could adjourn in her memory when it's time. She was in Camarillo. Yeah, she was still in her house, I believe. Yeah, age of 94. But she gave a lot of service. Some people liked what she voted for, and some people didn't. But she gave the city 8 years of her life, and so I think it would be fitting to. And I have this for Jeffrey.
Perfect, we will do that.
Okay, that's all I have.
Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, I attended a couple of meetings, had a VRSD meeting. The August 7th got canceled. I also attended investment committee meeting with Mr. Tremblay. I did do that. Just one comment, the street overlay that's taking place now looks really great, Dave. So you can pass on to your staff members and so on and so forth how good it's looking. And I'm very excited about the new traffic light going on.
Yeah, done again?
It's being constructed now, and that's quite a, I've never really seen one constructed. It's quite a process to construct those. It's very interesting to watch it all transpire. So, well worth the wait. So, again, if you pass that on, David, Rick's, a lot of really good things happen in our city here, and it's going to improve a lot of areas. So, good job. Yeah, it makes everything look so much better, doesn't it? It's just amazing.
Oh,
what a new
absolutely.
overlay does. It's kind of like painting your house, I guess. It makes it look so good. Kudos to you.
Mr. Tremblay, you have something?
Madam Mayor, I apologize. But the thought of a traffic light prompted me to remember this. Do we have any update on the traffic light at Village at the Park, adjacent to 101, and
Yes.
what an ETA is going to be on that? I keep getting questions on it.
Yeah, actually a date, not exactly for when that'll be finished construction. We do know that the final plans have been signed and are very close to approval by Caltrans. So it's a revision to the original design is what took place. And yeah, we just this week there's some back and forth on finalizing those plans, and it looks like we're real close. The contractor's on standby, ready to go once they get the permit number issued by Caltrans.
I'll just keep rooting. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Also, the improvement on the Central Bridge looks really good.
It does.
It looks really good.
Well, while we're at it, some of you guys may have had complaints about the bus stop out there in Central, how it is out there covered by bushes and all that stuff. Well, I learned today that they've moved that now to Home Depot.
Yes.
So it's there now.
The transfers, yeah. It's not, tell us where.
Right. No, it's on the entry between Target and Walmart.
Yeah.
Target? I thought you told me Home Depot
the
today.
entry drive.
No?
No.
Yeah, there's a bus stop there.
Correct. Yeah, there's a full bus stop shelter on the entry driveway off of Ventura Boulevard that's between the Target building and Walmart building.
I think people are going to feel much more comfortable up there.
Right.
There's a little
Oh,
bit
much
more
more.
with people about and not so isolated, so that was a good move. Anything else, Mr. Kildee? That was
That's
yours?
all. All right.
Well, I have a couple of things, and speaking of paving, I also was going to compliment you on the way streets looked. But I do need to go on the record that I'm not the only one on my street that would love to see an overlay or something done to it.
Did
You've
you
done
talk
all
about that
the way,
previously?
yeah, all the way around. Well, it's only bad now, as all my neighbors are saying, well, when are they going to do ours? And then one person said to me, well, we thought, maybe it was last because they didn't want to show preference to the mayor. And I said, well, wait until I tell you the story. The mayor doesn't get her street paved. So anyway, I promised that I would publicly go on the record requesting that someday, after 33 years, we get it. We've only had it overlaid once in all those years. So I've done my neighborly duty here, and I explained the reason why, that it needed more because of cracking and so forth. But it is a little hard to explain. A couple of meetings, policy we talked about, and then a VCOG administrative committee meeting, and that is basically to plan future agenda items. I've been to a couple of ribbon cuttings, and there was just one I wanted to talk about because to me it's very special when you see a young man who was raised here, went to school in Camarillo, graduated from Camarillo High School, and he has now opened a business here in town, and that was the Craft Shop. And it's a barbershop. And his family was there with him and very proud of him, and it's just wonderful to see a young man stay here, open a business, and we wish him the best of luck with that. Do you all remember Madison? She was with us a couple of weeks ago and was headed to Washington, D.C. And we got a postcard. And it's real quick, I'll read it. It's thank you for my award. I'm having so much fun in Washington, D.C., teaching people about type 1 diabetes. Tomorrow, get to go to the U.S. Capitol, and then we get to go see some museums. So it said, thank you, Madison. So that was very nice. She remembered to send us a postcard.
Of the White House?
Of the White House, yes. We don't, and that's why I thought I needed to share it, especially coming from her. This has been a night where we have some of our young citizens of our community really shining. I have one more thing I want to mention, and it kind of goes with what Mr. Trimley was talking about, the Constitution, and we talk about how we should appreciate it and learn about, and then appreciate also the editorial you were talking about a community and what a community is about. And I know I get kind of mushy sometimes about stuff like this. But we had the concert in the park on Saturday, a full house. The park was absolutely full, and it was our Garth Brooks tribute, and he did a great job. And he was singing the dance, and I don't know if all of you have heard Garth Brooks' version of that, but it's a beautiful song. The park was dark and the trees were lit up behind it, and all the cell phones came out and, going to the music. And it just gave you this absolute sense of community. It was like, wow, am I glad I live here, because you had thousands of people coming together as a community, and it was just this overwhelming feeling of being so glad we're in Camarillo and we are the community that we are. And that we really all have to work hard to make sure we keep it that way. See, I get all choked up. But it's just, we live in a wonderful place, and we need to do all we can to keep it that way and appreciate the community members that we have. So on that note...
It was your birthday that night.
Oh, you weren't supposed to bring that part up, but maybe that's why I was emotional that night.
I tried to sing happy birthday.
Yeah. But anyway.
Philip's birthday that night.
Yeah, your wife's birthday.
Same day. That's right.
But we do live in a special community. When you look at the streets being paved and the landscape and the people who care about their homes and open businesses, it really is a great community, and appreciate being a part of it. So with that, we do have a little bit of business we still have to take care of. I believe we still have a couple of closed session items to take care of. Do we need to announce them again, or do you feel like we've covered our bases?
Well, they are the two real estate items that are on the agenda that I mentioned before. Both of them are on Berry Street.
Okay. With that, we will recess to our closed sessions, and then after that, we will be adjourned to September the 6th, 2017 at 5 o'clock p.m.
My son will have 100 stores.